IB Nation, how are you, everybody? Welcome to our Irish Breakdown. Notre Dame football mailbag. It's Friday. It's St. Patrick's Day. It's Pot of Gold Day. There's a lot going on, Ryan. And obviously, if you have not seen it, we have a running thread going today where we are putting all the offers out there. We expect at least 85 offers today to go out, Ryan, to different 2025 prospects. Really fascinating. There's two Notre Dame legacy recruits that have been offered today that are actually good football players. They're just not getting offers because of who their dads are. That's James Flanagan and Jerome Bettis Jr. Obviously, namesakes are Jim Flanagan, who was a defensive tackle on the Notre Dame 1993 team, and we all know who Jerome Bettis is, right? So that's pretty cool. Really talented players, a lot more defensive players than offensive players. Here's a shocker for you, Ryan. I know you're going to be surprised by this. There's a lot of linebacker and defensive line offers going out today. So I know you're shocked by that.
I think we're expecting around 21 linebacker offers, Brian. So, things are treaded in the
two
same
offensive
direction.
linemen, right? I mean, so yeah, it is what it is. But
and at least one of those offensive linemen is clearly the best offensive lineman in the country, though. Clearly.
Yes. David Sanders is a dude. Some very talented players in the Midwest. I mean, there's some really, really good players in Illinois this year. Yeah. I mean, Talon Taylor, I'm not sure if that's how to say his name. He's a stud wide receiver. Really like Nathaniel Marshall. Christopher Burgess got offered today. Dominic Hulak, I believe is how you say his last name. He got offered today. There's some dudes in that Illinois class in 2025, Ryan.
And I know, and we were obviously messing with Sean a little bit on a thread, and Illinois, I'm telling you guys, man, Illinois is really great. I'm like, yeah, Sean, sure, man. But to one quick note is, I know he had already been offered, but a third legacy is expected today that we know of, obviously, right? Because Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, who is the younger brother of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, has already been offered in the 2025 class, so he should be getting his today as well.
We expect him to be kind of like Jet White. Jet White was offered again today. He even tweeted out, hey, re-offered, and so it's just so to make those guys part of, part of what the day is all about. So really big day, Ryan. A lot of that going on. But this right here, this is mailbag time. So we're going to dive in today's mailbag, Ryan, and we're going to get rocking and rolling here with some questions. So let's get started with one of the OGs of Irish Breakdowns podcast.
From Notre Dame, 2164. Thank you so much for kicking us off here today. Let's say the defensive line defense is better this year, but still not really that close to what we want it to be. Do you guys give the Owls another year or no?
I mean, look, I'm not going to really answer that question, Ryan, because that would require me to call for someone to be fired, and I just don't do that. The reality is if it's better but not really close to what it needs to be, changes need to happen. I don't care what those changes are. I don't care if it's moving someone to a different position. I mean, you guys can figure out how that needs to happen, but the reality is yes, changes need to be made.
Yeah.
Do I think the defensive line needs to look like Georgia 2021? No, it doesn't. I don't expect it to look like that. Does it need to be better than it was last year? Yeah, it needs to, and it should be completely honest with you, it should be better than last year's unit, just for a host of reasons that we've mentioned. And so, I fully expect it to be an improved group this year. And if it's not, then that's a coaching problem. That's what I'm comfortable saying right there. It's a coaching problem if it's not better.
Yeah, I feel like this answer is a lot more nuanced than like just, it's better, but it's not quite the championship level. I mean, because you're playing a completely different schedule than what you played last year, right? Like, what does it look like in certain situations, in the big games? Did the defense come to play? What was the adjustments that were made during the season? Have we seen a new philosophical approach from the defensive staff compared to what we had last year, that we wanted to see some changes made, right? Like, progress is not, it's not, just judged based upon one way to do things, right? Like, progress can show evolution, but it can also show, it can be a farce to a degree too, right? So I think that for me, Notre Dame 2164, it's about what it looks like, right? Like, I want to see game by game what improvements were made, Al Golden's improvements, the defensive line's improvements. I think that there's just a lot more nuance than just saying, like, point blank doesn't need to change just on like a very overarching concept, right? Like there's a lot of things that I think could make a much more in-depth approach to developing that next step, because like just saying it's better, but it's not quite where you need to be. That doesn't necessarily mean that Al Golden didn't change or did a bad job, right? Like that's not what it is. There's circumstances, there's injuries, there's, bad game, everyone's going to have a bad game occasionally. Like there's just a lot of context that I think that kind of broad stroke kind of misses a little bit for me.
All right, let's get to the next one here.
Question from USMA87. Is Al Golden visiting recruits? I did a quick look at the pot of gold offers, and most of the defensive players had conversations with Golden. Your thoughts?
Well, he hasn't been visiting guys recently because there's been a dead period. But, as we've said, look, Al Golden has certainly upped his recruiting effort recently. Now, here's the reality of it. I'm not going to be like, oh, it doesn't mean anything. He's only offering kids. That's better than nothing. And clearly a lot of these kids have talked to him and they've gotten an offer from him. That's important. That's good. I'm not going to like dismiss that to continue to bang on him for no reason whatsoever. Look, the reality is it needs to be followed up by strong recruiting efforts. And here's the deal. I'm going to say this right now, Ryan. Part of my frustration with Al Golden has been because I know he's a really good recruiter. He was a really good recruiter at Virginia. He was a pretty good recruiter at Miami when he had, he didn't have a great staff around him. That was a bit of an issue. And there was so much crap going on at Miami at the time that had nothing to do with him. Yeah. But he's individually a good recruiter. And so that's the frustration. Is it'd be one thing if man, he's not a good recruiter. Like it is what it is. Just go put a good defense on the field, call kids, make offers, and just, move on. Right. But he was a good recruiter back in the day. I mean, there was one year he signed 2 5-star linebackers from Virginia, Kai Parham and Ahmed Brooks, and signed some really talented players during his time at Virginia. So I want to see him be that guy. So, yeah, he needs to do a lot better. And it can't just be throwing out offers. But throwing out a bunch of offers and contacting kids get offers is better than what it's been. So it's a step in the right direction. And that's a positive for me. Now we just need to see what the follow-through is now that the dead period's over and you kids on campus and stuff like that. Ryan, there's a lot of linebackers that have been offered in 24 and 25 that have already set up visits to Notre Dame. So that's a positive.
I said this on last week's show, I think. I can't remember if it was on a recruiting show or if it was in a mailbag in another show, Brian. I am hearing Al Golden's name a lot more, which is a really good sign. It's not just extending offers. It's like, I just talked to Bodie Cahoon, for instance, yesterday or the day before, where he said that Al Golden reaches out to him a lot, like, several times a week. So I think that there's a lot more effort. And I think that it's just more about understanding 100% of what priorities are on the linebacker board, right? Like that's the next step, is that now Al Golden needs to find who his top targets are, and he needs to put in that effort. He needs to land some dudes, man. Like that's kind of where we are with this, right? Because I think that there's a misconception, Brian, for me, because some people throw a lot of shade at Al Washington, and a lot of it's deserved. And we've talked about that, right? Al Golden, Al Washington, though, he isn't just quiet on the recruiting side, though. I think people have a misconception about that. Al Washington recruits. It's just he recruits a little too much, in my opinion, like too many guys. Like, can we focus on the key guys on the board?
It's one of many issues he has, in my opinion. Yes, he recruits. He doesn't recruit the right guys. He's late on some kids that he shouldn't be late on. He takes weird approaches sometimes with kids, and but it's not that he's not trying to recruit.
It's not that there's no efforts.
He's not doing a very good job of it. He's not organized enough. He's not diligent enough. He doesn't have a plan. It seems like a lot of times, like it just kind of fly by the seat of his pants kind of thing. It's quite strange. Like, how have you talked to this kid like all the time, but you never talk to this kid over here who's a better player? There's no consistency to it, but he is doing stuff. Without Golden, it was just like, is this dude doing anything? Like,
never heard his name, man. You never heard his name.
And that was a problem. Well, that's not the case anymore. And so now that it's not the case, hopefully it changed. Now here's my concern, Ryan. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. My concern is that he's doing that until Max Bulla is ready to go. And then he's going to let Max Bulla take over the recruitments. I hope that doesn't happen. I really hope that doesn't happen because, as I said before, Al Golden, when he puts his effort and mind to it, is a good recruiter. He is a good recruiter, and I want to see him be more involved. Now, as a defensive coordinator, he doesn't need to recruit 75 kids, but he needs to be a lot more involved, in my opinion. Yep. There's no doubt about it. And he's got the chance to do so. I mean, look, again, I'm going to say this again. He was in the past a very good recruiter.
Sure.
And if he puts his mind to it here and is bought into being at Notre Dame, I think you could see his recruiting success really jump. I really do. It's just about whether or not he wants to do it over a period. Because, like, look, we did this with Brian Kelly before, right? Remember when Marcus Freeman first came and Brian Kelly really upped his recruiting? And we were like, hey, this is great. This is good. And we'll praise him for it. But then, like, a couple months go by and it's like back to being the old Brian Kelly. Yeah. That's the thing, is this has to be the beginning of a rejuvenated Al Golden on the recruiting trail. That's
transformation.
And if he does that, man, I'm going to be happy, because I do think he's a good recruiter, or can be a good recruiter. And there's no doubt in my mind.
And I think a guy like Peyton Pierce on the board, Brian, he would be a great example on how much Al Golden has kind of changed his ways as far as the interest level in recruiting and the initiative to recruit, right? Because, I mean, Peyton Pierce was looking very good to Notre Dame there for a few weeks, right? And then James Laurinaitis leaves, who was a GA, by the way. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, man, I don't know if Notre Dame has any traction there anymore. But now Al Golden has a chance to get back into that conversation, right? And to right the ship and then gain momentum back. So I think as simple as just like a Peyton Pierce recruitment might show you whether Al Golden has decided to take his game up a notch and bought fully in, or if it's kind of the same old story. So we'll see.
Right. And if they miss out on Peyton Pierce, that's a loss. But there's other really good linebackers out there. They just need to get them. That's going to be the big key for me anyway.
From God Country, Notre Dame and Barbecue. Happy St. Patty's Day to you as well. I made about 70 Reuben sandwiches the other day to celebrate this holiday. They are my favorite food. What's your favorite sandwich and favorite food? Ooh, that's a good one.
My wife likes Reubens, by the way, and she's making corned beef and hash tonight, or corned beef and sauerkraut, I think is what she does. She's making that for her. I'm making myself a steak. But she likes that on St. Patrick's Day. What's funny? I'm Irish, but I've never really been like the St. Patrick's Day guy. I'd always be like, oh crap, I got to grab like a green wristband or something so these idiots at school don't try to pinch me all freaking day. I've never really been a big St. Patrick's Day guy.
This is pot of gold day. This isn't St. Patrick's Day.
Exactly. So yeah, like my wife comes down and she's got like a green IB hoodie on, and she's like, "Where's your green?" And she starts like pinching me. I'm like, "You got." It's like, so I throw a hat on that's got green on it. I was like, seriously. So favorite sandwich. My favorite sandwich is one I make at home, Ryan. I'll get like a hoagie roll. I'll put this. Dietz and Watson, I think is what it is the best that I can find around here, because I don't know. I haven't been able to find any boar's head meat around here. Boar's head is great meat, but I haven't been able to find anywhere around here where they sell it. But Dietz and Watson is a really good meat that I get from around here, and so I'll go get some fresh cut roast beef and fresh cut turkey, and so then I'll make a sandwich. I'll just put turkey and roast beef on a hoagie. I'll put provolone on the other. Cut it in half, and then I'll toast it because I like sandwiches hot. Then put some lettuce on it, and then, man, that's a great sandwich, because and I'm not like a big condiment guy. I'm like, if you have roast beef and turkey and it's not like, if it's dry, then you got bad meat. I don't need mayonnaise or whatever else to give it that moisture. So that's probably my favorite sandwich to eat. My favorite food overall is probably, it depends on what mood I'm in, right? Sometimes it's pasta, sometimes it's pizza, sometimes it's steak. That's. If I could only eat like one meal for the rest of my life, I'd probably have like steak, mushrooms, and I don't know, like baked potato or something like that. Probably what I would have. So yeah, it just depends. But it just depends on, I'm a mood eater. You know what I mean? Like, I'm really in the mood for a burger today. But then there's other days my wife's like, you want to go to Red Robin? I'm like, no, like I'm just not in the mood for a greasy burger right now, But I'm usually never not in the mood for pizza, and I'm usually never not in the mood for steak or pasta. I'm almost always in the mood for those. But sometimes you get more of a hankering for one thing and over another. So that's kind of how I am. And I also make chicken and rice all the time too. I made that last night. I'll take some chicken breasts, cut them up into little cubes, put a little garlic powder on them, cook them in olive oil, and then just put them on a bed of white rice in a bowl and just eat it that way. I love that. It's really good. Enjoy it very much.
Love it. Sandwich for me, and again, prefacing this by I live outside of Philadelphia. Like, I'm about 40 minutes now. I grew up 20 minutes outside of Philly. and it's a cheesesteak for me, Brian. It's a cheesesteak.
Mm-hmm.
There was a place near me called Lilo's, and it's here in South Jersey, that has the best cheesesteak I've ever had. So it's not even a Philadelphia cheesesteak. This place in here, they have a really nice seeded roll, but they do this garlic butter stuff where they spread it on the roll. They toast it up on the grill. They have delicious steak, not overly greasy. Like, they don't make it super greasy. It's just more about great meat and some provolone cheese, and I'm good to go, man. I don't need onions on a cheesesteak. I just need cheese and some good steak.
So,
like, that's what I need.
Are you a Cheese Whiz guy, or are you like an actual like?
No, I'm a provolone.
Okay.
Provolone guy. Yeah.
Because like it's funny. Like when I moved to Muhlenberg, I would get a Philly cheesesteak every day in the cafeteria. It was really good, and it would be just like you said, just a shredded steak, and then it would be mushrooms and actually they put Swiss cheese on it, right?
Okay.
And it was really good. And then the first time I ever had the Cheese Whiz one, I'm like, this is going to be terrible. Like, it sounds awful. Was after we played Ursinus that year at Muhlenberg, and it was phenomenal. I'm not gonna lie to you, I love it that way. But I like them both ways. So like when I'll get a Philly cheesesteak every now and then from Penn Station here in town, and it's like the provolone. I get you get it the steak, and I don't get peppers and onions on it either. I just need steak, mushrooms, and provolone, and I'm a happy dude.
Yeah. See, I like Whiz from certain places, but in my experience, like, there is some bad Cheese Whiz out there though, man, where you're just like, this is not good. This is not quality stuff. Right. So I usually just go for, I like to see him grill it up and put the provolone cheese on top and let that melt on the grill and do all that type of stuff. So cheesesteak would probably be the favorite. Lilo's in South Jersey, if anybody ever comes by, that's the best cheesesteak I've ever had by far. Favorite food, my great-grandmother would probably slap me in the head if I didn't say Italian food. So,
my wife would be pretty ticked about that too. Yeah.
Chicken parm, the endless types of pastas, meatballs.
I make a pretty good chicken parm, Ryan.
Yeah,
I do. I make a pretty good homemade chicken and parm. Yeah. Or chicken parm. Yes. My wife even likes it. So my wife actually likes it more than going out to get chicken parm. You know what? The thing that sucks is there was a place in town called Seminini Grill that had really good chicken parm. Was like fresh made. It was like all the stuff was from locally, but it shut down during COVID because it was like a really small restaurant. It was pricey, but it was like, it was like 6 tables is like all there was, and it shut down during COVID. The COVID
stinks, man.
Yes. So yeah, I was bummed about that. Now it's replaced by a smoothie shop. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
That was the worst part about COVID, man, was like so many good small business, family restaurants shut down, man.
Well, they weren't essential apparently. So
apparently.
Whatever. So anyway, Walmart, we could keep that open, but not whatever. Anyway, get me started on that. Anyway, let's move on quickly because I'm about to get real pissed. Here we go.
From Brandon Posner. Hi, Brandon. Any offers go out yet?
Brandon, what?
Plesner. Am I saying it right? Any offers go out yet today to guys you are excited about or we should keep an eye on?
Oh, man.
There's a lot, Brennan. I mean, honestly, I can do it almost at every position.
I'll say this because it's. I'll let you kind of rack your brain because, like, you can see Ryan's head.
I'm literally going by position. I'm like, sort of
kids do I love that I want to talk about. I'll say this because I think this is really important. It's whenever there's a strong class in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Notre Dame's got to take advantage of that. And one thing that gets me fired up is there's some legit dudes in the 2025 class in Illinois, and I'm probably not saying the name right, so I'll probably correct it over time. But I'm just going to take my best shot. It's Talon Taylor, the kid from Illinois, from Geneva. He is a stud. He reminds me a lot of like the kids that go to Ohio State, the Chris Olaves, the Garrett Wilsons, that kind of guy. He is an absolute stud as an XZ type player at Notre Dame. Super smooth, fast. Like, I had to is his film sped up? Like, I had to go back and watch everybody else running around him to see if the film was sped up or not. Because the best way to tell if film was sped up, watch the referees. When their legs are going like a million miles, his film's sped up. No, it wasn't sped up, right? When they get their hands up for touchdowns really fast, you're like, yep, this is sped up film. No, his wasn't sped up. He is a dude. I love Nathaniel Marshall as a big end. I think that kid's got a chance to be – and he was the player of the year in the conference on defense, Sean said, over Justin Scott.
He's a massive kid, man.
Oh man, he is a strong athlete. And you want to see how athletic he is. Go watch him play basketball.
Yeah.
You know, like he did a spin move on a kid, drove down the lane and racked it. I'm like, this is a dude. Yeah. The Dominic Hewlett kid's a pretty good player from the state of Illinois. Chris Burgess is a little tight-hipped, but he's big. He is ripped up. He looks a lot like Steve Filer. He's powerful. He's a kid that's got some skills. So there's some legit players in the state of Illinois. That's the first thing that gets me fired up. And I don't know how Indiana is in 25 because there wasn't a single kid so far that's been offered in the state of Indiana. Yeah. But there are some dudes in the state of Illinois. And that's got me fired up.
Yeah. I like the Taylor kid too. I had the chance to talk to him 2 days ago, just kind of talking about his film and stuff. He's a really talented player. Usman Kroma. For me, Brian, out of Georgia, the running back, that kid's a monster, man. I was like, he's 6'1", 210 pounds as a sophomore already. He ran for over 1,500 yards last year, like 180 carries in the state of Georgia. That kid is a monster, man. Absolute monster. There's a couple of really talented quarterbacks that have been offered too, which is like Cutter Boley's a really talented kind of pocket passing quarterback out of the state of Kentucky. Deuce Hill, who's an athletic left-handed quarterback, is a really talented kid. Man, there's a lot, honestly. I mean,
and they've already offered, obviously, Bryce Underwood. I expect him to kind of get re-offered again today. I would expect him to get re-offered again today. Deuce Knight has been offered.
Deuce Knight is what I meant. I think I said Deuce Hill. Yeah, Deuce Knight.
And then you're thinking of the other Hill kid from Georgia is who you're thinking of. And then I expect KJ Lacey to get offered at some point in time today, the kid from Alabama or from Alabama. So. And then George McIntyre, did you mention him?
I did not. No.
Okay. He's a good player George too. McIntyre from Tennessee's got offered today. He's a pretty good player. So there's some really good quarterbacks so far. But there's some. David Sanders is so Brian Smith actually had a chance to talk to him down at one of the Under Armour camps that Brian was at, and he said the kid is legit interested in Notre Dame. So they're going to have to kind of get going on him here real immediately because he is an absolute, legit top 5, top 10 national player already type of player.
I wouldn't be shocked if he's the number 1 player in the class eventually.
One of the services already has him ranked number 1. So, and it's legit. He is, and he goes to a private school. He goes to Charlotte Providence Day, which is where Osita Ekwonu came from. So he's a really good player. I'll be honest with you. So far, I'm a lot more impressed with the 2025 class on film than I am the 2024 class, just nationally. There's some dudes in 24. There's always dudes, but it's not a super excite me class so far at a lot of positions. The 25 class, from what I've seen so far, is loaded. And there's a legacy recruit that I watched. I was like, okay, yeah, his dad played at Notre Dame. I get why they're offering. But then you actually pop in James Flanagan's film, whose dad was Jim Flanagan, who played T-tackle on the 93 team. You're like, this kid can play. He's like 6'5", 230. Like he's a little bit gangly. He's like a sophomore, typical tall sophomore, kind of grown into his body. But when he starts running straight, he's fast. He's got good hands. He battles in the run game. So he's a legit good player.
And he's a left winger for their 28-0 hockey team, the state championship hockey team too.
So he's got some toughness. If you're playing hockey up in Wisconsin, you're pretty good. You're a pretty good player.
Coordination too, right? Coordination and balance. You got all those tools working for you. Yeah. So yeah, man, he's a good one. There's. What's crazy too, Brian, is like all these. I threw a little bit of shade at the linebackers earlier for like 21 guys or so getting offered, right? But some guys in there. There's some dudes there though, man. Like they're all like 6'3" plus too. Like they're all long, man.
Long, rangy guys. And the other good thing too about a lot of those linebackers is, Ryan, is a lot of them are from regions that you'd think should be pretty friendly to Notre Dame. Obviously, we talked about Jeremiah Wusu-Koromoa's brother. If you haven't seen Anthony Sacca play, watch Anthony Sacca because he'll be a linebacker in college. He's a freaking free safety in high school. Like, and he reminds me a lot of Jack Kaiser in high school, but a 6'1", or Jack was like 6'6". This kid's like 6'3" and long. He's flipping his hips. I watched him earlier today. He was pedaling. He like flips his hips, undercuts a post route, picks it off. You're like, this is a Rover Will kid that's going to be a dude. And he's from a Catholic school in Philadelphia. And so you're just like, and that's the kind of kid you got to go after. So he's another kid that I like a lot. When you first told me he was visiting, I thought you were talking about Anthony Specca. who I'm not a huge fan of in the 24 class, but I mean, he's okay. He hasn't progressed a lot from when he was a freshman. But no, when I watched this kid play, I was like, okay, this kid can really play. So there's some dudes. There's a lot of kids from Pennsylvania on the list today. Some Jersey kids that are really good players, Illinois kids. So look and say there's some and there's some legit players and highly ranked guys from regions that are very pro Notre Dame, and that kind of gets you a little bit fired up, in my opinion. At least for me, it does.
Saka's father played at Penn State, Brian, and he was actually a teammate with Al Golden at Penn State.
Okay.
So there's a little connection there.
There you go.
Be good.
Yeah, he can play, man. He can play. So, yeah, there's a lot of offers, man, that got me fired up about today. And there's going to be more to come. There's going to be more to come. There's some – so it's a good – I'm looking through the linebacker list. I'm, like, rolling my eyes when I first saw the list, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then I start watching film, and I'm like, this dude can ball. I'll say it's one of the – so far – it's early yet, but it's one of the deepest linebacker classes I've seen in a long time. A long time. You could end up with 10, 15 top 100 linebackers, legit top 100 caliber linebackers in this class, right? At least from what I've seen so far. It's a really good linebacker class.
I talked earlier to Elijah Barnes that got offered. He's out of this. He's out of Texas. And his team, Brian, went 0-10 last year, right? Yeah. So I watched a little bit of his film this morning, and the first play, dude, like middle of the field dropping, one-handed snag interception. This like 6'3" linebacker. Yeah. Oh, okay, we got something here, man. We got something here. Yeah. So there's some dudes at the linebacker spot, no doubt.
He can play. He can play. Yeah, it's a good class.
From John A1, since 2000, what is Notre Dame's most fundamental team?
2012. I mean, that's always the first team that pops in my head. That was a pretty fundamentally sound team, in my opinion. They didn't beat themselves. They didn't get it. I mean, until the championship game, and then a lot of the mistakes they made all year, didn't make all year, they made missed tackles. It's like there's this notion that like Alabama just ran over Notre Dame, and I'm like, they did the linebackers, but if you go back and watch the defensive line, Notre Dame's defensive line played well that game. Yeah. How many times did we see Manti and Zeke Mata just whiffing on tackles like at the line of scrimmage? I'm like, D-line did their job. You got your linebacker, your All-American linebacker keyed up in the hole, and they're just whiffing. Yeah. We came to find out that Manti had a lot of other things on his mind going into that game. But the D-line played well that game. But outside of that game, that was a very fundamentally sound, don't beat themselves, be in the right place football team. Yep. And that I don't think there was another team that was anywhere close. 18 was decent in some areas. Defensively, they were very fundamentally sound. Offensively, and not as much. That's the problem. In recent years, the offense hasn't been a very fundamentally sound unit. Like from like 18 to 21, it wasn't a very fundamentally because your receivers weren't coached worth a darn. Your O-line was mediocre. It wasn't real good. Defense has been very fundamentally sound. From Elko started it, and then obviously Clark Lee built on it. Last two teams have not been as fundamentally sound on defense as the Elko and Lee teams were, to be completely honest with you, and that's got to get better.
2012 is an interesting one because I think like defensively too, Brian, like there was a lot of defensive players, I'm just kind of recollecting here, because obviously, Manti was an all-time great, right? But there were some players in that defense that I didn't think were the most physically impressive athletes of all time, but they were just good football players that year, right? So that tells you that they were probably coached really well. Like I think of Zeke Mata, right? Zeke Mata was a 6'2", 250-pound safety. Not a great athlete though. Like he was a marginal athlete, but he had a really good year that year because he was coached really well.
For a safety, he was a marginal athlete. You put him at Rover or even Will linebacker, and all of a sudden he's a much better athlete. But for the position he was asked to play, you're absolutely right, Ryan. He was a marginal athlete for that position. But your point is great. He was physical. That team was very physical. That 12 team was very physical, and he was always in the right place. Diaco did a great job with that team. It was Diaco and Chuck Martin. Chuck Martin had moved over to offense. I think Bobby Elliott, was on that staff. I'm going to have to look it up. But, you had Mike Elston was coaching the D-line. So, that was a very fundamentally sound football team. It was. I think Bobby Elliott was on that team. Obviously, Diaco coached the linebackers. You had Kerry Cooks was coaching, I think, the corners, and then Bobby Elliott was coaching the late Bobby Elliott, who's a really good football coach. Did a nice job there. Kerry Cooks did a really solid job with the cornerbacks. You had a true freshman starting on that team. So, it's that was a really well coached football team. Yeah, very much so, no doubt. No, good question. Good question, John.
And a question from we're waiting. I love that. I love that's fantastic. How many pots of gold went out for today? Any surprises in who did or didn't get one? We hit on this one a little bit. There's going to be more that are circulating throughout the rest of the day, but we're expecting 85 plus in the pot of gold conversation. And that doesn't mean like it's not 85 new offers to the board. There's a few offers that were already on the board, but they get, the pot of gold still. It's like a reoffering type of thing. So we're expecting upwards of 85 today.
Right.
Which was 30 more than it was last year, just for some context. There was like 50 something last year. So
they better not leave anybody out of this one that like they did Justin Scott last year. That they better not make that mistake again. But no, they're not. I mean, this is a really good effort. It's just the coaches are very engaged on this. I mean, I know some coaches that are on vacation and they're talking to kids today while on vacation. Because obviously that spring breaks Notre Dame this week, spring ball starts. Some of these coaches are taking a couple days off. So they're not, a lot of these guys aren't even in town and they're doing this, which is really impressive for me. It's really impressive. So,
and this event is the cultivation of months and months and months of work, right? So, I mean, hats off. I feel like we don't give Notre Dame program enough credit sometimes. I'm not saying me or you, I'm saying just in general from the consensus is like, they've been working on this for a long time, man, and they put together a really impressive list, in my opinion.
Well, you can thank Chad Bowden for a lot of that. I mean, that's the reality of it. Is Chad does a great job with this kind of stuff, and we don't talk as much about him as we used to because I think it's we're just kind of used to it. But he has a big hand in this, and his team. It's not just him; he's got a team of people that work with him. That I think do a really good job. They work hard, they grind, they come up with really cool ideas. They break down it. And thing about Chad that people have to understand is, Ryan, he's not just like a recruiting gimmicky guy. He's also a guy that evaluates players. You and I have come to appreciate the job he does, where he finds some very underrated players on the board and goes after them. So he's a lot. He's not just a, hey, let's organize this and come up with cool graphics. Like a lot of the back end people, like Aaron Kearney was kind of that way. And he did an okay job, but he was more of an organizer of the events. I didn't really care much for his evaluations. I don't think Dave Poloquin can evaluate his way out of a wet paper bag. And he used to be involved with evaluating players, but he was good at organizing and things like that. And that was fine in structure, but he shouldn't have been involved in anything involving evaluating players. Chad can evaluate players, right? And I know some people at Notre Dame don't like the antics, but you know what? This is 2023. Those antics are needed to make Notre Dame relevant. They work, and he can evaluate talent. So him and his staff deserve a big hand for what is going on today. Because honestly, a lot of the kids that they're going after today are guys that him and his group have found, or the Chad has found, that because the coaches can't. There's just 10 coaches. They can't. Scour the entire. You need that back office group of people that can evaluate film and say, hey, let me pass this one along to the coach. And you need to be able to trust that group. And from the people that I know, there's a lot of, I don't know all the coaches, but the coaches I know trust Chad a lot. And we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. So that's something that it makes this a lot easier to be able to put out a list as this big today. His group deserves a lot of credit for that.
And I don't know what Chad's long-term goals are in football and everything, but I mean, that evaluation background, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the NFL at some point, right? Like, would you be shocking to you if he's in like a scouting department in an NFL team at some point? Like,
the only reason I would say I'd be surprised is because I really feel like Chad likes working with young people. I do. I think he likes being the way that he is. I think he likes being able to engage with young people and have that kind of impact. I do. I think I wouldn't be shocked, Ryan, from the standpoint of, somebody might want him at some point in time, but I just think his personality is just geared more towards college. I think the concern that I have is more geared towards if Notre Dame doesn't, make some changes, then there's going to be some other programs that are going to just try to take him from, and there already are, but he's pretty loyal to Marcus Freeman. But Notre Dame's got to make some. I'll just leave it there. Notre Dame's got to make some changes, in my opinion.
You have to keep Chad Bowden as long as you can if you're Notre Dame. You have to keep him as long as you possibly can.
Yep, him, Mike Mickens, Chancey Stuckey, guys like that. You got to try to keep them as long as you can. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
Question from John A1. Since 2000, who has been the most effective slot receiver?
Probably say
Golden Tate was the one that popped in my head.
2000, but he wasn't really a slot receiver, though, at Notre Dame. He was more of an outside guy. You had him on one side, Michael Floyd on the outside, and you had I'm trying to think. They had David Grimes at one point was a slot guy. So Golden was more of an outside guy. He would line up in the slot at times, but he was primarily not a slot guy at Notre Dame. You have like Theo Riddick in 2010 and 11 was pretty solid. I mean, honestly, I think the best individual season from a slot, in my opinion, was Chris Fink in 2018. He was really good in 2018. That's a good one. USC was just early in the game, like we're just not going to let the outside receivers beat us, and they had some big corners and they were run blitzing, and it was just like they were like Chris Fink can't hurt us. And he went out and had like 7 catches for 100 yards in the first half of that game in 18. And they were down 10-0 in that game. And Chris had one of the best throws Ian Book ever made was in that game. That corner route for a touchdown in the first half to Chris Fink, that was a phenomenal throw and an even better catch to stay in bounds. So I'll probably go Chris Fink 2018 for me was the best slot that Notre Dame's had since 2000, just off the top of my head. Yeah, 40-plus catches, 500-some yards. And he had clutch plays. That's the thing for me, Ryan. Like that, he had a huge touchdown catch in the opener against Michigan where he outplayed 2 guys for the football and that bomb for Brandon Wimbush. He had the big game against USC at the end, which secured a playoff spot. So, he came up big in the big games too. And that matters a lot to me. And he was a pure slot where, Golden played inside, outside. He did a little bit of everything. So I would say probably Chris Fink would be one for me. Matt Shelton was a very underrated player on that 05 team in the slot with Samardzija and because remember Rama got hurt for a second game of the year. Yeah. And Matt Shelton had a couple big plays for them that year as well. So that'd be my anybody else you want to?
Theo's a good one. Theo Riddick's a good one. Yeah. Theo was just he's like the perfect gadget player, isn't he? Like you could make him into such a great gadget player today because he could play running back, he could play slot receiver. I wish he honestly played a little bit more in like this more modern era today because I think Theo would have been dynamic potentially in college versus a really good player that he was, Like I think he could have been even more utilized than what he was because I don't think you had to. I feel like it with where he was in his career, right? It's like you're a wide receiver and then you're a running back, and it's just like. Could have been a little bit of both, a little bit more of. So
because he started as a running back at Notre Dame in 2009. He was recruited as a running back, started a running back, and then moved to receiver that in 2010 when Kelly came on, played that in 10 and 11, moved back to running back late in 2011 when Jonas Gray got hurt. If you remember, he played a lot of running back against Stanford that year. And then obviously finished his career as a running back. So I would have liked to see him, like you said, he could have been a really good gadget player in an Oregon type of offense.
Percy Harvin type of vibes, like those types of guys. Yeah, exactly.
All right, here we go. Here's another one, Ryan.
Domer Grizz, happy Friday. You too, sir. Which coaches, one on offense, one on defense, have the most to prove this spring?
Well, I think Jared Parker on offense is the easy one because he's the offensive coordinator, and obviously he's got a lot more on his plate this year than he did last year. I thought he did a great job last year at tight ends. He's the one on offense. Defensively, I mean, look, it's still the coordinators, right? I mean, Al Washington's got to do a lot better job. There's no doubt. But at the end of the day, the guy that primarily has to step up is Al Washington, I think, or Al Golden. I think the 2 coordinators to me are the guys that have the most to prove this year. At the end of the day, because look, as a coordinator, you have a say in what the defensive line coach is doing and what the safeties coach is doing and what the running backs coach is doing and the receivers coach is doing and all that type of stuff, right? So it's up to you to make. I mean, you've got to hold them accountable as well. Then the head coach has got to hold you accountable for the job that's getting done. So it's the 2 coordinators for me, Ryan.
I was going to say it was definitely Al Golden for me as well on the defensive side of the football because, like you said, Brian, if Al Washington isn't doing a good job, it's Al Golden's job as the overseer of the defense to give him a little kick in the butt, and be like, hey, brother, like, let's get back on track here, right? Like, this is what we need out of this defensive line at Notre Dame. So I think it's definitely the coordinators. I mean, and then on the offensive side of the football, you brought back a lot of guys that you already knew about, right? Like, I mean, I guess I could pick Joe Rudolph, but like, I think that I have confidence in what Joe Rudolph's going to be. He's a more known commodity. Jared Parker's not a known commodity as an offensive coordinator. So there's a lot on his plate. And there's high expectations on the offensive side of the football as well. Like, we can't escape that. You have a really talented offensive line coming back. You have some playmakers. You have a quarterback that's been wildly successful during his career as a college quarterback. So there's a lot of pressure on the offense to be really good this year. And I think that Jared Parker has the abilities to step up to the plate, but we have to see it, obviously.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, we got one. Here's Katie Keevers is with us. I think she said she just put her kids down for a nap so she could watch the show. So
love it. Love it, Katie. Katie's question is, which would make a bigger statement to the national media? A blowout win against Ohio State, USC, or Clemson? I think it's Ohio State.
Oh, easy. Yeah. Ohio State. Ohio State. I mean, if you think about it, Notre Dame's blown out Clemson, the other two teams already.
Yeah.
I mean, they blew out USC multiple times in the last 4 or 5 years. They blew out Clemson this past year, and it was big. I mean, you blow out Ohio State, that sends a message that just, man, like, bro, Notre Dame they are not joking around this year. They are not joking around this year. Yeah, it's definitely that one.
Because the last couple of meetings, I mean, obviously it was 21-10 last year, and it was a competitive football game for anybody to watch. But a couple of games before that, Brian, like Ohio State Notre Dame was a lopsided game when they had played each other, over the course of the last few years. So I think for me, it's definitely Ohio State, because honestly, I think people just want to beat Ohio State. Like, it doesn't matter about blowing them out, right? But you've beaten those other two teams. You've blown them out. Ohio State, it's about winning the football game first and foremost. And if you blow them out, that like sends shockwaves, especially because they're Midwestern schools too, right? They're both in, a similar region. So, Notre Dame being able to do that and then to showcase their dominance against a team like that, I think that would send shockwaves across college football, honestly.
Yeah, it's about as big of a statement game as Notre Dame can have outside of blowing out Georgia or Alabama or beating them in the postseason. There's no doubt.
From Hulk Strongest.
Got a super chat from Hulk Strongest, yeah.
Appreciate you. Hey, guys, let's say they use Chris Tyree the correct way. What would his numbers look like?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, to me, I'd say about 1,000 yards of total offense would make me very happy. Where he's, about 500 to 600 receiving, or about 400 to 500 rushing, 400 to 500 receiving. I'm just talking offense, not special teams. That would absolutely be where I would go. Because the thing about it, if you're using Chris Tyree correctly, it's not even just about his numbers. We saw this last year. I mean, it was against Cal where they had gotten Chris Tyree going early. Next thing you know, they send him in motion. Cal just completely overreacts to it, and they run like a little angle route backside to Audric Estime, and they just hit him on like a little 5-yard pass. He catches it and runs. We saw it against North Carolina where they had gotten him outside in the perimeter. They got Logan Diggs on the perimeter, and they just bang an inside zone, and just Audric Estime just splits them because they're all flying outside. And I don't know why they went away from that stuff. I mean, those were both with Drew Pine at quarterback. I don't understand why they went away from that stuff and didn't use Chris Tyree more that way, because when they did, their offense became far more predictable. So, and we saw it again in the bowl game where they did use Chris Tyree more, and he didn't get a ton of touches, but he was there. He was going in motion. He did get some touches. And so, like we talked about this earlier, there was a play in that game where they ran an outside zone, or not an outside zone. It was like almost like a buck sweep. They pulled both guards. It was early in the game, if you remember, Ryan. They were kind of backed up. They were running to the left, and the on screen is left to right. And Chris Tyree got tackled for like a 4 or 5 yard loss. But the way that South Carolina handled that play, Notre Dame later in the game went back to where they ran that same action, but this time they just had Tyler Buckner keep it, and they went backside with it. South Carolina flew to the Chris Tyree side, and so then you've got two pullers going around the edge, and they just didn't have enough guys to defend Notre Dame, and Tyler Buckner went for a big play. I think it was the touchdown pass to Braden Lindsey, if I remember correctly. I'm actually going to go pull this one up again real quick. But I believe they sent Chris Tyree on a motion in that direction.
I believe so too.
And they kind of went over top of it, and he was able to go make a play on it. So, Chris Tyree went on a motion, and the safety rolled down, and Braden Lindsey just ran by him. So it was wild how, a guy that Notre Dame fans don't like very good, every time he's on the field, defenses seem to not have the same opinion that Notre Dame fans do of Chris Tyree. You go back and watch games when Notre Dame is actually using Chris Tyree effectively. He's hard to defend, and you know exactly why South Carolina was worried about that, because they saw what happened against Clemson.
Yep.
And when he was getting outside the pocket, and it was just like, man, I remember you and I talking about this at the time, Ryan. Like, I don't understand why Notre Dame went away from that, because they were scared of that. He was hurt. He was starting to gash them, and then they just kind of went away from it. But I mean, it was really effective, Ryan. And I'm actually pulling up the touchdown pass. Pass now.
It's a good note, though, Brian, because South Carolina watched that Clemson game a lot because it's a common opponent that they played, right?
Correct.
So, like, they know how they matched up with Clemson.
Well, they not only that, Ryan, they watched that game preparing for Clemson. Like, that would have been film they watched preparing for Clemson even before the bowl game started, Yeah. So, yeah, I'm watching this Chris Tyree play right now. The Braden Lindsey touchdown. If you watch it, Chris Tyree goes in a jet motion. Like, their nickel and their safety are both stopping or working outside. And by the time the safety realizes what's happening, Braden Lindsey's already even with them. And if Braden Lindsey gets even with you, you're done.
It's over.
You have no chance. And I mean, it was a great play usage, and I don't understand why they didn't do more stuff like that during the season. I really don't.
What's the expression, Brian? If you're even, I'm leaving, right? Like, that's just
for a fast guy. Yeah, I mean, he was even and he was facing downhill. Yeah, and the guy actually did a pretty good job of recovering, but he was playing catch up the whole time, so he couldn't make a play on the ball. And Tyler Buckner threw it out where only Braden Lindsey can go get it, and it was a touchdown. Right. I don't understand why they don't do that more, because when they did it, it was effective. And that's the point, is it's not just his touches. It's what those touches then do to the opponent. Because say what you want about Chris Tyree, he's one of the fastest players in college football. There's no question. And teams know it. They've seen him do it. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to let that guy rip off a big run. And next thing you know, Audric Estime is ripping him right up the middle. Logan Diggs is ripping him right up the middle. And, man, it's got to be done, man. It's got to be done.
And I also think that there's got to be a better way to utilize him with the football in his hands as well, too, right? Because like you said, I mean, he's the ultimate decoy, man, because you can't teach that speed, right? It's like your eyes have to go to him because he's a 4.3 athlete, like, at the end of the day. But, I mean, there's no reason he should be averaging – what did he end up last year, 4.2 yards a carry or something like that? Like, nah, man, he needs to be like 5.5, 6 plus, somewhere in that ballpark.
He needs to be definitely over 6. There's no question.
And then passing game-wise, I mean, 10 plus as far as pass receiving average. I mean, he should be I think the two words that you always use for the offense is efficient and explosive. And I think that comes down to what Chris Tyree is, right? Like, he needs to be efficiently explosive, because when he's efficient, he is an explosive player when he's used correctly, and that's where it is.
I think that's the big key, is use him correctly. I'm really hoping that this staff figures out a way to use him correctly, because again, he doesn't have to be a high volume guy to make an impact. That's the reality.
And he's clearly bought into, right? Like, to this program, to this staff. I mean, it could have been very easy for right after the season for Chris Tyree to be like, I'm out of here, man. Like, he's still here, man. He's still here.
Yep. No, he's definitely bought into Notre Dame. And if you know the Tyree family at all, it doesn't surprise you. It's a big I see his dad tweeting out his kids' grades as much as he tweets out their track and football accomplishments. I mean, and you can see it because they put a lot. The whole family. He's got 2 younger brothers. They take a lot of pride in being well-rounded. Like, I don't want you to just be a great football player. You need to be a great football player. You need to be a great young person. You need to be a great student. Yeah. That's what's demanded, and that's one reason I have a ton of respect for the Tyree family. I mean, his parents do a great job, and it's not just Chris though. It's both of his 2 younger brothers too. I think I saw during the football season, one of his brothers, I think it was Nick, tweets out that he got a 4.0. You know what I mean? Like, and Chris had great grades as well. So that's why you understand why Chris is one of those kids that's seeing it through, because that's how he's raised. He was raised to see it through. You're going to get your degree from Notre Dame, and things don't go right this year. You still got another year to play. You can go play somewhere else and work on your masters if you need to. But hopefully they do right by him this year. And I hope that they do.
Sounds like a great pair of parents and a great family.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt about that. All right, let's get to some more questions here, Ryan. Here we go.
From Domer Grizz, since everything is cyclical, what outdated football strategy, offensive or defense, do you think will be the next trend to come back?
I don't know if I'd say strategy. I think I guess you could use the fullback. I think the fullback will come back at some point in time because I think that there's and now it could be in a different format. It may not be the 6'1", 240-pound guy like Nebraska used to have all the time, or that was that it's like every team like a William Floyd type of guy. You know what I mean? That body type. Lorenzo Neal types and all that.
Just a block of humanity. Yes. Howard
Griffith. Those guys. I don't know if it'll look like that, but I think
it'll probably look more like Kyle Juszczyk that plays for the 49ers.
Davis Sherwood for Notre Dame has got more of a fullback body than a tight end body, kind of an H guy. But I think as teams get more spread, teams get smaller at linebacker, teams get less physical, more focus on playing for width, not so much downhill. You're going to have some team that's going to figure out a way to emphasize the fullback in the run game and use it really effectively. I mean, Oklahoma did it under Lincoln Riley. They would use a fullback type of player really effectively.
Yeah.
And I could see that becoming a thing again, in my view, where again, you got to be able to catch the ball in the backfield, stuff like that. But I could see that becoming a thing again, especially in the NFL. I think that's where you could see it even more, Ryan, is some team is going to say, okay, I'm in this division and we got a bunch of teams that are really small and fast on defense because we're going to come in like Harbaugh did at Stanford back in 2009, and we're going to hammer you. We're going to go get ourselves a big old physical running back. We're going to get ourselves a legit 6'2", 245-pound fullback that can catch the football. And you're just not going to be ready for us because you're just not going to be big enough to handle what we're doing. Some team will do that and it'll work and they'll win a lot. And then other people start to mimic it to a degree. I think that would be one that I'd feel most comfortable saying, Ryan.
I think the changing of defensive fronts from like what the volume perspective is one that like changes back and forth so often. I mean, Brian, do you remember in like the late 80s and then into the 90s, like the 3-4 defense was it, man. Like you played 3 down linemen, you had 4 linebackers. And then in like the 2000s, teams started going much more heavily. It's more of an NFL perspective, but it started going much more into like you needed 4 down linemen, right? Like 4 down for consistent pass rushing purposes, all that great stuff, right? But now you're seeing it, especially in college football now. I mean, how many teams run 3-man fronts all the time, right? Where it's just like you went from 3 heavy to almost exclusively 4 for a while, and then now you're getting back to 3. I think that the fronts are like the easiest cyclical thing because literally it just goes from 3 to 4 back and forth, right? To an even or odd man fronts, depending on what area you're in. And I think the other one too, Brian, for me is that with defenses playing so much more nickel nowadays, I think that the next thing is that teams are going to start running the football at a higher volume than they have over the last few years, right? They're going to say, you have a lighter personnel in the game. What am I going to do to beat you? I'm going to run the football down your throats. I mean,
I just have to draft one back capable of doing it. I don't need to like rehaul my entire offensive line. I mean, one of the best running teams I've ever seen in my lifetime was always made fun of for being small. That was the Broncos, and there's things you can do to be and they were a physical running team. They weren't a soft. I mean, they ran outside zone, they ran stretch, the fast wipe stuff, but they were physical at the point of attack. And if you don't think they were, go ask Gilbert Brown if they were physical or not, right? So I could see because it's easier for me to switch to that, Ryan, than it is for you to change your defensive philosophy and draft a bunch of different type of linebackers. Just yes, agree completely. And that's kind of you and I are on the same page, Ryan. I think those two things go hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Is especially in this era of pass catching tight ends. You give me 21 personnel can look a whole lot different if I have George Kittle at tight end.
Sure.
Because I can basically be in a 3 receiver type of situation, but also still be able to go, block like I'm in 12 personnel basically. And I think it can give you a lot of things to do. No doubt.
You know what else I think could happen too is in the heavy RPO era that we're in right now, especially in the NFL level, I wouldn't be surprised. And I think you're seeing a little bit where the running back position starts getting bigger now, right? Like bigger bodies because those all-purpose backs that we used to know and love are now becoming those slot receivers that are going to catch RPOs all day. Like maybe that, and the gadget players, the Deebo Samuels of the world. 10, 15 years ago, Deebo Samuel is probably a running back. Like he's probably not a slot receiver like he played in South Carolina and what he's played in the NFL. So I think running back body types might get bigger because those all-purpose type players are more prominent in that slot role now in the NFL where you're just going to throw them RPO screens and quick lances and that type of stuff now. So I think the archetype of the running back might be changing as well, potentially.
Yeah, no doubt. Especially if the Titans do keep Derrick Henry, or whoever trades for him goes out and wins because of him. Then look, NFL even more than college football is a copycat league, man, and that's just what they do. It's always been that way our entire lives. I mean, it's not going to change. It's definitely not going to change. Here we got another one from Ryan. Do you play the computer game Civilization? This guy asked this question yesterday. I've never played the game either, so I can't really answer that question.
Sorry, John.
Yeah, sorry.
TB12 for Heisman. Best guess at who is going to be the first commits of the 2025 class. Who's the best commit overall? Who's the next commit overall?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I have no idea. I mean, part of me wants to say one of the legacies, right? Bettis or Flanagan would be my best guess, but I honestly couldn't tell you. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, TB12. But I guess we could kind of tackle the next one after that, though, Brian. It's like, who's the next commit overall? So that's like any class, right? Obviously, we're working through there. 2024, I would say this, man. There's a lot of really important visits coming up with a lot of kids this spring, especially into the blue and gold game. One guy I would keep an eye on is Kennedy Urlacher, who's visiting in April 15th. I think he's in a very good spot with Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has done everything they need to do. I think that they have family support for the program as well. So if that visit goes well, April 15th, I wouldn't be surprised if things are trending heavily in the direction of Notre Dame, because I think things are already in a good spot. But again, there's going to be several guys. And if you're not on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, I think one of the best things we have outside of, just the intel that we provide from a team and recruiting perspective is, the visitor list, I think, is very up to date. So if you want to see some of those, consistent lists, that I think that's very important. So Kennedy Urlacher might be a guy to keep an eye on. But again, there's a lot of talented kids that are already set to make visits on campus this spring.
I don't really know who it would be. I mean, there's several guys I could see. I could see Bryce Young, going soon. I'll tell you a guy that I think that Notre Dame is in a much better position with that might surprise some fans who's going to visit this month as well, is Jaden Riddell. I think Notre Dame is in a much better situation with him than a lot of people think. And it's not just because of the CJ Carr. I mean, I've been hearing this for a while. Yes. They're in a much better position with him than people think.
Very nice family, by the way, the Riddells.
And yes, Kennedy Urlacher is Brian Urlacher's son. Yes.
Yep.
So somebody asked that in the chat.
And he lived in Chicago for 12 years before moving out to Arizona. So, yep.
Yeah. I'm going to ask this question of you, Ryan, just because I want to see your face. I'm going to ask this one. But John Mayern, says, favorite boy band back in the 90s? New Kids on the Block. First of all, New Kids on the Block is from the 80s. Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, or 98 Degrees?
I mean, if that's my choice, I would go Backstreet Boys, I guess. But I wasn't really a boy band guy, though. Yeah, so
I only listen to boy bands when you're with a girl because she likes the boy bands. That's about the only time. That's how I was with country music for a long time. I would listen to country music if the girl I was trying to, get with at the time liked country music. That's about it.
So Brian, my mother used to be when I was a young kid. My mother was a manager of a 7-Eleven. Boy bands, yes, agree, yes. Chris. But my mom was a manager of a 7-Eleven, and they used to have this little CD rack, and they used to, when they wouldn't get bought after a certain amount of time, you would just be able to take them if you wanted them. And I remember I had a 98 Degrees one when I was 7, I think, or something like that, man. It was so bad. Such bad music. I can't even imagine what you're saying because you're muted. So that's good, though.
It's probably best. I said that's moral of the story is that's probably a story you should have took to your grave.
Well, I mean, I listened to it once and I'm like, wow, this stinks. So we're not going to do that again.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. Here we go. Let's get back on track with some football questions here. We got one from John A1.
John A1 says, how would you project the 2024 offensive line class playing out under Joe Rudolph? It's a good question, John. I mean, you have a great initial baseline. I mean, I've talked to Peter Jones within the last week, and I put something on the message board about my conversation with him, and I think that he's fully bought into Joe Rudolph. So I think that you have solidified Peter Jones in the class after the transition from Harry Heastand. He is a really talented offensive lineman that I know me and Brian both like, based on our conversations in the past. And he's a player that plays right tackle, but he projects better inside at guard on the next level.
That's who? Who I didn't hear who
Peter Jones.
Okay,
Peter Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Peter Jones is definitely one that has been solidified after Joe Rudolph came on, in my opinion. After that, man, it's about, I don't think it's going to be a bigger class. I think it's going to be a smaller offensive line class, but it's important after that to get true offensive tackle types. The most talented player on the board, in my opinion, is Gerby Lambert, obviously out of the state of Massachusetts, who is same high school as Boubacar Traore, who was in the 2023 class for Notre Dame, 6'7", 280 plus. He's a really talented, true blindside protector type of kid. I think Notre Dame's in a good spot, but like you need to get him back on campus, right? Like you need to get him on campus and you need to lock that one down because Gerby Lambert is quietly one of the more important players in the 2024 class for Notre Dame overall, not just on the offensive line. So Gerby Lambert, I think, has to be a guy that Notre Dame pushes hard for, obviously. And then if it's a three-man class, that my pick would be Caleb Brewer personally. Like that would be the guy that I would take because he is, I know Notre Dame likes him a ton, 6'5", 300 pounds, high school tight end. That kid, I think, can play offensive line on the college level. But if nothing else, man, he's going to be a kick butt guard. Like he has that type of upside. He honestly, Brian, I know we were talking about this the other day. I think he could play all five positions if he wanted to on the college level. I truly do.
Doubt.
Really talented player.
No doubt. I think they're going to go to 4. I think they're going to end up going to 4 in this class. I don't think there's any doubt. I think just the way that it's going to work out, I think they're going to go to 4. I'll tell you a guy that I really like. And again, I how would you project? I don't know how it's going to pan out. I know what I would like.
Sure.
And if I could kind of do sort of my ideal offensive line class, like if things go exactly the way that I want them to go from here until signing day, it's Peter Jones, Caleb Brewer, Gerby Lambert, and Liam Andrews from Massachusetts. I'd be fine with Styles Prescott. I like him as well, but that 4 right there, that's sort of my dream class. Because I really like Liam Andrews. I mean, you watch him play defense, you're like, this guy's an athlete. And I know he's listed as an interior offensive lineman. I think he's pretty long, Ryan. I think he could end up being like a Zach Martin type of tackle in college. Maybe not in the NFL, but in college he could be a tackle as well. So, and he's definitely athletic enough to play on the outside. There's no doubt about that. Now he's got to add weight. He's like 270. He's going to have to put some weight on where the other guys are already like 300 pounders basically.
Yeah.
But I really like the Liam Andrews kid as a player. That would be my ideal 4-man class. There's no doubt.
And then after that, I mean, you mentioned other guys that are on the board for Notre Dame. You mentioned Styles Prescott, who's obviously an in-state player in the state of Indiana for Notre Dame, for Notre Dame board. They have Kevin Haywood, who's out of Pennsylvania, who's a bigger guy. He's like 6'7", 295 already. I know, Andrew Sprague out of Missouri is on the board for Notre Dame, another gigantic kid. He's tall, very big kid.
Big and strong and physical, a little stiff for me, to be honest with you, Ryan. That's my only knock on him. He's a little stiff for me. Grant Bricks is a nice player, but he doesn't like blow me away either. Like they're nice players. It's not a great O-line class. Those guys are nice players. Kevin Haywood's a pretty big physical kid. He's been to like 3 or 4 different high schools though, and that's always a bit of a
that is weird.
Bit of a head scratch. I'm like, okay, why? Like I'd be curious as to know why. So that's a bit of a let me investigate that a little bit. But he's a big physical kid as well.
I put an update on the board and an article, obviously, on Haywood a few weeks, maybe a week ago. And if people haven't seen that one on the message board, go look up the Kevin Haywood visits that he's taking. I've never seen a longer list of visits in my life for one spring, man. He's like, consecutive.
Yeah,
I'm like, is this kid going to school at any point? Like, it's weird, man. It's a little weird, but yeah.
It's going to be interesting how that line class shapes up. It really is. It really is. All right, let's go down to another one, Ryan.
From Brandon Plensner. What 5 states would you like Notre Dame to focus on in 2025 based on some of the talent you've seen in the class? That's a good question, man. That's a good
Illinois,
question.
for sure. For sure. Ton of kids in Georgia.
I think Pennsylvania's got some dudes in 2025.
Yep, that's the next one. Pennsylvania has a ton of dudes. Texas, because always Texas.
Always Texas.
Always Texas.
Yes.
Trying to think of some other ones, Ryan, just kind of looking through this list.
Some decent Virginia players that 2025 it looks like.
Yeah, it's just the problem is a lot of them are from the Virginia Beach area, and Notre Dame's had problems just getting those kids, as we found out, that 757 area, they've had problems getting those kids into school.
Right.
For a 5th area, Ryan, that's a good one.
I mean, my impulse was in Missouri, but I don't think there was a lot of Missouri kids on that list.
No, I didn't see any, to be honest with you. I think California is. I mean, California, Texas, just because they should always be priorities. Georgia, because it should always be a priority. But Illinois, and Pennsylvania for me are big ones.
It looks like a really good Pennsylvania class in 2025. Like there's some guys there, man.
Yeah.
A lot of Philadelphia guys too.
Look, I've said this before. You always have first impressions of things, right, Ryan? Like it's just the nature of it. You can't help not have a first impression. So, I see the list of kids that they're going to get offered. I'm like, okay, that's just Al Golden just recruiting dudes from a state he's familiar with, and then you like pop in the film of Anthony Sack, and you're like, I was wrong. That dude can ball. So the Pennsylvania, Jersey area, I mean, because that's the thing too, Ryan, is like, Brandon, I don't necessarily count like a specific state. It's more regions. And sometimes a region could be like Eastern PA, and Jersey is more of similar than Eastern PA is with Pittsburgh when it comes to recruiting football players, right? So, Philly as a football area is going to have a lot more in common with North Jersey than it is Western PA.
Yeah.
And so, it's more kind of like that. And the Western PA has a lot more in common with Eastern Ohio than it does Philly.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit different that way.
I would really like Notre Dame to start getting more in that DMV area, man. We keep talking about it, but just hasn't happened as much. Nope. The state of Maryland has places like, we've talked a ton about, like the DeMatha Catholics of the world, right? The St. Francis Academies.
St. Francis has a lot of kids too. Yeah. There's a lot of DBs that they offer, that they have or will offer today from the Maryland area.
Yeah. I was sad to see that someone that won't be in that equation actually is Jeremiah Wusakormo's little brother, Nathaniel. Nathaniel's going down to IMG for his last 2 years?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That would make it, to me, it's going to make it a little bit harder for Notre Dame to get him at that point in time, with that being true.
That just happened like a couple weeks ago. So, yeah.
I did not know that. All right, let's get to some more questions here.
From TB12 for Heisman. Best guess at who is going to be the first commit of the 20. Oh, we already hit this one.
Yeah, sorry. My bad.
Okay.
Good. Here we go from Tom Burke.
Tom Burke, if you had to build your offense and defense around two players in Notre Dame's long history, who would they be? Oh, the whole history?
So two offense and two deep. Well, first of all, as I've always said, I'm only going to my history is only guys I've seen play. Like it'd be easy for me to say Ross Browner, but you know how many times I saw Ross Browner play in the whole game? Zero. Right? I mean, I know he would be a guy that Lou Emoji would go with, but I can only go with guys that I see. So two guys on offense and two guys on defense that I would go with. Offensively, I'm going Quentin Nelson and Rocket Ismail on offense.
Mine would be offensively would also be Quentin Nelson, and I would probably pick Brady Quinn would be my second.
I get that one.
Yeah.
I just feel like give me a guy like Rocket and I can do a lot. I don't necessarily need a Brady at quarterback.
I didn't really see Rocket. I only saw him.
That's true, because he was out before you were born. So again, that fits into you give me. That's why I don't pick Tim Brown, because I don't remember Tim Brown in Notre Dame. I remember Tim Brown in the Raiders.
Yes,
but I don't really remember Tim Brown at Notre Dame.
I actually remember Quadri Ismail more than Rocket Ismail. So
the missile, yeah. Defensively, that's a much tougher one. I'd probably go Manti, and that's a good Manti, and Justin Tuck would probably be where I would go.
I would go Jalen Smith would be my linebacker.
Yeah,
I think
that's a good one too. Yeah,
and man, like I'm my mind is picking through Justin Tuck, Stephon Tuitt, Harrison Smith. I mean, built through the defensive line, right? So give me Stephon Tuitt because of the inside-outside ability he has.
If you'd have seen Justin Tuck, did you see Justin Tuck much in college, Ryan?
I remember his last year at Notre Dame. I remember his last year. Yeah. But
again, I'm going with box guys. I mean, look, there's Tom Carter. Todd Light was the best cornerback I've ever seen at Notre Dame. I mean, there's some guys like that I could go with, but I got to stick with what I believe in builds championship football teams. And you still got to win in the trenches. So give me Manti or Jalen. Give me Justin Tuck or Stephon Tuitt or a guy like that. Yeah. I mean, there's some dudes I can build around right there, man. There's no doubt about it. A Chris Zorich type of guy, I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, Chris Zorich was like a little bigger than Howard Cross, but he was just he was a dude.
Did Chris Zorich wrestle? I'm sure he wrestled, right?
I don't have any idea, but I'd be shocked if he didn't, the way he played. There's no doubt.
From John A1, is it possible for Alexander Ahrensberger to play on the interior of the defensive line? On a full-time basis, yeah, John, I think so, just because he's so tall, right? Like it's a center of gravity leverage thing. But I would love to see Alexander Ahrensberger on like obvious pass situations to play inside against guards occasionally. Like I would love to see that. I think that his length and his quickness for his size would be a big mismatch against guards. So would I like to see it occasionally? Yes, in the right situations. I just think the leverage battle would hurt him inside consistently.
Yeah, passing situations, absolutely, John. Absolutely. And I don't know if he has quite enough mass to be an every down inside guy either. I mean, I think you can get away with
pretty
the
maxed
height.
Out. Yeah,
you can get away with the height if you have long hands, and if he comes off the ball relatively well, like leverage wise for his size. I think it's the size at that length and that size. Like if like Albert Haynesworth was like 6'6", right? I mean, he was a massive interior guy. John Henderson was huge. I mean, he was 6'6",
and Stroud,
6'7".
And Henderson,
Marcus Stroud. That's right. But they were massive. They could hold up against that, and he's just not that way.
I know there's been bigger players, Brian, but John Henderson's one of the biggest dudes I've ever seen in my life, man. Yeah. That dude was just insane.
He's not small. He is not a small human being. There's no doubt. Here's Ryan. I'll ask this one because it's more for you. But Jake Roosman asks, where does Notre Dame stand with Peyton Pierce currently? Thanks for all you guys do. You are welcome for that, Jake. We appreciate it.
So Jake, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but they were in a great spot with Peyton Pierce, after he visited earlier this year. And I felt like Notre Dame was kind of the team to beat, where everything that happened with James Laurinaitis leaving, because that was Peyton Pierce's main contact at Notre Dame was James Laurinaitis. That was the guy who he spent a lot of time with on that visit specifically. It's the guy that he spent a lot of time talking to in general from the recruiting side of things. And the minute that he left, I just kind of threw a wrench in everything. He didn't have a deep relationship. Really, I mean, he had relationships with the other people on the staff, but just not a deep enough to, I guess, maintain that momentum. So I think that Notre Dame is still in it, right? But they have some work to be done there. Like there's definitely work to do. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's over by any stretch. I think that they're still in the conversation. It's just about, Al Golden and the rest of the staff really need to make that a priority, and they need to just get the momentum back because they lost a lot when James Laurinaitis left. There's no doubt about that.
Dude, I completely whiffed on the previous question. I can't believe I love Justin Tuck, Stephon Tuitt. I cannot believe that I didn't go with Bryant Young. I completely forgot about Bryant Young.
See, I don't remember Bryant Young at Notre Dame. I just remember with the 49ers.
Yeah, you're like two. So. Yeah, he was a dude at Notre Dame. I mean, he was like number 7 overall pick. I mean, he was a stud at Notre Dame. So, yeah.
Yes.
Could you imagine if Jim Flanagan and Bryant Young's kids both come to Notre Dame? Because they were like side by side back then. I mean, Bryant Young was inside, Jim Flanagan was an end, but they were dudes back then, man. Like that would be some great memories right there, man.
Man, the interior defensive
it would be Manti or Jalen at linebacker and Bryant Young at D line. And the reason Michael Campbell said Bryant Young, so I was like, oh my god. He actually said Bryce Young, but I knew he meant what he meant. I meant Bryant. Bryce is the son, so I cannot believe I forgot that one. But yes, it'd be Bryant Young. With all due respect to Justin Tuck and Stephon Tuitt and Lewis Nix and all those great players, Ronaldo Wynn. I mean, all those great players from Notre Dame over the years. Chris Zorich, George Williams, all those guys, Jeff Alm, it's Bryant Young by a mile. I cannot believe I forgot that one.
I mean, he's both in the college football and NFL Hall of Fame. So
yes, he was a star. Yeah. He was a star. There's no doubt about it. Here we go, Ryan.
From Domer since birth. Gentlemen, what do you value more for a coach program? An NCAA basketball Final Four appearance or college football playoff appearance? 4-team playoff. Have a great weekend.
What do you value more for a coach program? An NCAA basketball final? To me, it's a Final Four. I think those are a lot more rare. It's a lot harder
because you have a lot more steps to get there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it's hard, man, to get there. It's really hard to get there. So yeah, I mean, a basketball coach with a lot of Final Four appearances is much harder for me because it's more so about the regular season for the. And there's all the things that kind of go into it for a college football, but it's just two different animals, man. And so to me, I feel like a coach that has a lot more fun because again, you can get to a Final Four in college football and get murdered in the first round and you're okay, whatever. I mean, what did they accomplish? Like, what did Michigan State accomplish in their one playoff appearance? They got destroyed. They got embarrassed, right? I mean, Notre Dame didn't fare a whole lot better, but at least Notre Dame kind of competed a little bit with Clemson for a while. But Washington's that way. I mean, they battled a little bit. It wasn't one, but it just. I would much rather see it. I mean, because to get the NCAA, you got to win 4 games to get to the Final Four. 4 games.
There's so much.
That's the impressive thing for me.
There's so much. There's very little carryover usually from a team to team from a basketball perspective too, from like one year to the other as well. Because I mean, with players being able to leave after 1 year, like you're building a whole new team sometimes, from a year to year basis, right? And so I think that the lack of continuity makes it difficult on the basketball side of things. I mean, college football, there's the transfer portal and everything, but if you sign a player, in a recruit for college football, they have to play 3 years in college, so they can't just leave after a year, right? So I think that also that the lack of continuity sometimes in college basketball, that's tough to be consistent, man, unless you're, John Calipari, who could just recruit to that
even
level.
He has. I mean, when was the last time John Calipari has been in the Final Four?
Not even sure.
It's been a couple years. So I mean, it's really hard to do that back to back to back. I mean, Krzyzewski had a little bit of a stretch like that early in his career, and then one later in his career. But the last time that Kentucky made the Final Four, was 2015.
Wow, really? That long?
They've only been in the Elite Eight twice since then. That's wild. I mean, you just don't see it as much, right? I mean, in Krzyzewski, he was getting big time. He kind of out Calipari. He went to the Final Four last year, his last season, and before that, the last time he had been in the Final Four was back in 2015, also the year that they won the title. And then before that, the last time they had been in the Final Four was 2010. So as great as Mike Krzyzewski was, from 2010 to 2022 seasons, he was in the Final Four just 3 times.
That's right. Crazy.
And so, it's a lot harder to do, in my opinion. It's definitely a lot harder to do.
Can I say this, Brian? You know that I'm the voice of the people. So all I have to say to everyone out there is go Princeton.
Yeah. You can't talk trash about a Jersey school winning when you didn't watch a second of the game.
So I didn't watch a second of basketball.
I don't want to hear it.
I'm going to watch the basketball tonight. I'll watch the basketball tonight. All right. I'll watch the basketball.
I don't even want to hear it. I don't even want to hear it. All right. We do have a super.
I did see that wild last play in the game though.
The Furman Virginia game. What a stupid play that was by.
There was somebody right on the baseline that was wide open too. I'm just like,
oh my god,
the baseline, man.
Panicked, man. He just panicked. Oh. The guy from Furman after the game was like, I can't believe he threw that ball. I can't believe he threw that ball. It was not good. It was not good, man.
That kid's spotting up there, man, had ice in his veins too for that last three. Ice in his veins.
It was the cleanest game winner I've seen since the Villanova kid hit that shot against Carolina a few years ago.
Yeah.
Remember that play that they ran to win that game? And he just kind of trailed and he just flipped it back. He's like, buckets, championship. Like, I couldn't imagine the guts it takes to knock down that kind of shot, man. I just
seriously,
it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. We have a super chat here, Ryan.
From Tyler Evans. How is your guys' brackets doing for the NCAA tournament? I want to throw mine in the trash yesterday. I didn't do a bracket, so Brian, you can vent here if you like.
The only problem with throwing my bracket in the trash is it's only on a computer. I didn't do one on on paper this year, so I would kind of be out of computer if I did that. So I didn't have a great day yesterday, Ryan. I did not have a great day. I finished pretty strong. I picked Penn State to win. I got that one right. I did okay in some of the brackets. I picked Boise State to win over Northwestern, so I got that one wrong. I obviously picked Arizona to win. I didn't get burned too bad with Arizona because I only had them going to the Sweet 16. So far I've only lost one Sweet 16 team, and that was Arizona. But I had Virginia winning, but I had San Diego State upsetting Virginia in round 2. Yeah. So I had San Diego State going to Sweet 16. So I actually have a shot to get that one right if they can beat Furman. That's Brian Dutcher. If you remember him, he was one of the guys that helped recruit the Fab Five. He was an assistant under Steve Fisher for a long time. He's now the head basketball coach at San Diego State. So I watched them play. Ange and I went to dinner the other night to Texas Roadhouse, and they had the Utah State, San Diego State conference championship game on. Mm-hmm. And I watched them play. They defend pretty well. They shoot okay, but they defend really well. And I like teams that can defend in the tournament. You got to have good guard play, and you got to be able to defend in the tournament to really make a run. And I think guard play is important, and they have that. So I went with them. And of course, Virginia getting beat, I think only makes it easier for them to do that. Although, obviously teams like Furman, they get that one win and they get that confidence. It's like, now
they somehow make the Elite Eight. Like, sure.
Oh,
sure.
yeah. It's like Loyola that year that they made the run all the way to the Final Four. I mean, that was an impressive run. So
that's the best part of the NCAA tournament, Brian, is like we always remember the George Masons of the world, right? Like that's the best part, in my opinion. It's always fun.
Yeah. Now I am in a bit of trouble, Ryan, because I picked Xavier to go. Now keep in mind, I watch very little college basketball, so I just was like, whatever, look at stats and matchups and stuff. Xavier with 8 minutes left they're a 3 seed. They're losing to Kennesaw State 61-24. I have Xavier in the Final Four.
61 to what?
61-53. Excuse me.
I think it's 24. I was like, whoa.
61-53.
Gotcha.
And so if they lose, I will officially be throwing my, mentally and emotionally throwing my bracket out. So
the great thing is that if you have it on your doc, you can delete it, and that technically goes to the trash, right? So you can throw it in the trash. There you go.
I'm going to close this webpage with all my picks and just call it a day. We had Bama, Purdue, UCLA, and Xavier in the Final Four. And again, I watched very little college basketball. I only did a bracket because Bill King, the guy on Bill King show, asked all the people that come on their show a lot to do a bracket with fans, and I was like, okay, cool, whatever. I only did one this year. I used to do like 10 brackets. I'd get like print off the sheets, and I do like, just all these different fun brackets. And it was just fun to kind of go with different angles, but I just don't follow it. I don't follow college. I would like to, though. I do like college basketball. I just don't have the time to watch it. You know what I mean? But I enjoy college basketball.
I did flip on the Duke Oral Roberts game yesterday for a couple minutes when Oral Roberts actually was making a little bit of a comeback, man. And then they fell flat on this in the last couple of minutes, but great last name.
Yeah. Oral Roberts. Bunch of got their butts kicked. So must run in the family.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Let's get back on track here, Ryan.
I don't know whose family though. So
yeah, there you go.
From Joe Medina, Ryan to Brian. What was your earliest Notre Dame in-game memory that made both of you fans? That's a great question.
Well, I've said this before. I mean, for me, I remember the 88 season, and I think the game that really solidified it for me, I remember the Michigan game, but the game that really solidified it for me was the Miami game. I mean, that was just watching that game. And I don't know if there was a moment, but I just remember falling in love with Tony Rice in that game. And I don't remember what the moment was, but I just fell in love with Tony Rice in that game. And like I've said before, my dad was a Notre Dame fan, but he was more of an NFL guy. He was more of a Redskins fan. So I went against him in the NFL. I was a Broncos fan, so I had to go with him in college, right? So I was like, yeah, cool, I'm a Notre Dame fan. But it was just because my dad was. It wasn't until really watching them in 88. I was 10. But when I watched them that Miami game, and then I was really completely sold, was like, okay, I'm in it for life, was the USC game later that year when Tony Rice took that option play for a touchdown. I'll never forget it. I said I was watching on a big old satellite TV, watching that play, and then when Stance Magala had the pick six, I was going nuts. That's what solidified my Notre Dame fandom. Now that was in game, meaning like watching it. My first Notre Dame game in person wasn't until 2007. So yeah, it was all off TV stuff.
Yeah, mine was on TV for a long time as well. I don't think it was an in-game moment though, like an actual game. The one player I remember that it was funny. It actually was a recruiting thing, Brian. I remember Notre Dame landed Carlisle Holiday, and my dad was so pumped about Carlisle Holiday, man. It was like, I remember my first Notre Dame jersey was a number 7 jersey because of Carlisle Holiday. It was because of Carlisle Holiday. It was why. And
if they would have run the offense that they should have run with him, I think they would have been really good.
Yeah,
really good.
Man, he was such a good athlete, man. He was electric. I remember. That was like when you had to like be very obscure. It was a very obscure to try to find high school highlights. I just remember finding Carlisle Holiday's high school highlights, and it was like, whoa, man, it was pretty good.
Oh yeah. He was a good one. He was a good one. All right, Ryan. Here's another one here from John A1.
John A1 on both offensive line, defensive line. What's a good balance to shoot for when recruiting high upside guys versus high floor guys? I think that depends, John, a lot of what the roster looks like currently, right? I mean, I think that matters a ton, kind of projecting a little bit, but it's a good question, though. It's a good question.
I think it's the volume of the two.
Yeah.
It's finding the right balance of volume. And so, for every 10 players, if I can be 50-50, I'm okay with that. I'd rather kind of be like 7 high floor guys to 3 high upside guys. All the guys you have should have some level of upside, right? I mean,
Sure.
You don't recruit a guy who's just, okay, he's going to be what he is the day he arrives. I mean, I don't know if you necessarily want that, because then you end up with like a Darnell Ewell where he never gets any better and he just can't play,
Yeah.
But give me 7 high floor guys and 3 high upside guys for every 10 that you recruit. So like if you sign 20 guys, you got 6 guys that are just really high floor, low floor, high ceiling guys. I think that's about as many as I would like to have in per 10 to 20 guys is 5 to 6. Is the rest have got to be higher floor guys. I mean, that's where Georgia is to me, right? Like Georgia recruits a ton of high floor guys that have pretty high ceilings as well, and they'll take the occasional very raw kid like a Darnell Washington who was really raw coming out of high school.
Yeah,
and then he pans out, right? But partly what helps him pan out is he never had to be the guy. He was always a number 2 to somebody, right?
Yep.
So it's like Bama made a killing of that. Like Bama had so many guys that are overrated going in the NFL draft and coming out of high school. But what they did a great job is they had so many high floor guys that it made them all look better because they were all really good. None of them were necessarily elite, but they were all really good, and it made them look better.
Yeah.
And then they'd get the NFL, and you're like, this guy wasn't as good as I thought he was, right? Well, yeah, because he was never that good. You just had 11 guys like him, where most teams have like 5.
Alex Leatherwood,
yeah. I mean, I'm even more referring to like when Bama was really, really good, back in the teens, the mid to late teens, when they were just really special on defense. Like a lot of those corners didn't pan out in the NFL. Like D. Milner didn't do anything in the NFL.
No.
Dre Kirkpatrick has been okay in the NFL, but not like kind of where he was drafted.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Nowhere close to that. But it's just they were all so good, and Georgia's kind of followed that mantra too. Although I think Georgia's kind of recruited some even higher level guys than Bama did, and key areas like the defensive line. That's the biggest difference. Bama had a bunch of like. Early on when they were winning, they had like a lot of Brandon Diedrichs and Lorenzo Washingtons and guys like that. Terrence Cody's. They were good players. They're not elite guys. Their elite guys are more the backers and the corners and the safeties.
Yeah.
And that changed a little bit in recent years, like the Quinnen Williamses and the Deron Paynes and guys like that. But early on, they weren't recruiting the elite interior guys. Georgia has recruited elite interior guys. And that's been a big thing. So Jalen Carter was a high floor guy with a high ceiling coming out.
Yeah.
Jordan Davis was a low floor, high ceiling guy. And finding that blend, because he wasn't a big time recruit coming out of high school. He was like a 3-star kid, but and pretty raw. Like he's like, this kid's either going to be really good or he's never going to play a meaningful down, because you don't know if he's going to be in shape and do all that kind of thing. And 7-3 is about where I'd be comfortable. Right?
You just named a couple names that just like. I still can't believe Drake Kirkpatrick has a son that's like a high school senior and he's only like 33 years old. Man, like, this is wild. And I heard he's a decent little player too. I haven't really watched him much, and Darnell Ewell, man, I haven't heard that name in years. I remember watching his high school highlight tape, and that dude was like a man amongst boys.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was put together for a senior, man.
That's one of those ones I whiffed on big time. I was like, there's no way he's not at least going to be a good rotation player, at the very least.
He looked like Adonis on the field as a high schooler, man. He was well built, strong. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. Here we go. We got another one, Ryan. Here we go. Let's roll.
Katie Kiever said, it's early, but do you guys have a 2025 quarterback you really like? Yeah, there's a couple.
There's a lot.
Like.
Yeah. I don't know if I have one, Ryan. You want to kick off?
I mean, Bryce Underwood is the best guy in the class, in my opinion, right? And I think in a lot of people's opinions out of Michigan. He's a really talented kid. Everyone's on Bryce Underwood, though. So, like, that one's going to be a tough pull out of the state of Michigan.
It's going to be tough to get, especially the year after getting CJ Carr. It's going to be really tough to get him out of Michigan.
Yep. Yeah. But the Hill kid that they just offered, who's the dual threat, isn't his last name Hill?
Deuce Knight.
Deuce Knight. I keep saying Deuce Hill.
You're thinking of the Antoine Hill kid from Georgia.
I know.
I like Deuce Knight a lot.
Yeah,
the lefty kid. He's
smooth. Katie, he's 6'4", about 185, 190 right now. He's skinny, but he is a lefty with a live arm. The first play was like, oh, that arm is live. And then the very next play, he runs like quarterback counter and goes for 6. I'm like, oh.
Smooth, man. So the first throw too, Ryan, that you're talking about too, is I didn't think I'm like, he's waiting a long time to let this ball go. Yeah. This skinny kid, and it doesn't like jump out of his hand like you'd think. It just kept going and going and going. It hits the dude over the top and just trying like 60 yards down the field, man. I'm like, this kid's got hope.
That kid's he's like a javelin thrower, man. Yes. Like the ball releases and the heavens open up and here it comes, man. Like that's what it looks like. It really does. Kid is, but Katie, the tough part about Deuce Knight is that Deuce does not play on a very good football team. I mean, they went like 3-8 last year or 2-8 or something.
Like the kid we liked out of Texas last year, right?
Yes, Jacoby Robinson. Yeah, this kid makes a lot out of maybe limited around him, right? But he's very talented. He's going to be a little raw just because there's some plays where it's just like he's holding the ball forever because he has to, right? Because he's just behind and has to make a play happen. But that kid can run. He could throw. He's a tall really kid. He's going to fill out. Yeah. He's got the goods, man. I really like him a lot. I really do like him a lot.
I'll tell you the couple of the kids, the only kid that they're going to offer today that I don't love. So obviously George McIntyre's really good pocket pat. And the thing I noticed too, Ryan, they're offering different types of quarterbacks,
but all tall, just different types.
Well, KJ Lacey's not really tall. He's
like the 6'1" kid. He's like the 6'1" kid. Yeah.
But George McIntyre, traditional top 50 caliber player, drop back quarterback, big arm, clean mechanics, accurate, good footwork. He's a talented kid from Tennessee. Bryce Underwood's a star.
Yes.
Deuce Knight's just really clean kid, really fluid. Love his ability. Don't like Cutter Boley. I didn't see his sophomore film. I don't know if he was hurt or something, but I watched him. I saw him at Notre Dame's camp last year at the Irish Invasion in his freshman film. He's got a really funky throwing motion. And it's like down here. Like he throws the ball from like really down here. And again, I don't like changing kids' throwing motions. And you can't be 6'2", 6'3", and throw the ball that low. And I'm just not going to love it. So I'm curious if he's altered his motion at all. He just didn't blow me away, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm watching him next to CJ Carr, and it's just like, no. I mean, again, he's a year younger than CJ, but it just was a different world. The KJ Lacey kid from Alabama, I like a lot. Right?
I haven't seen him yet.
He's a gamer, man. Like he's not a guy. He's like 6'1", 190-ish. Does a lot of stuff off platform, like just drops it down and he'll throw around a guy. Reminds me a little bit of Tyler Buckner as a thrower, just a little bit cleaner mechanics than Tyler had coming out. Not the dynamic athlete that Tyler was. Just really smart, good decision maker, gets the ball out on time. He's just a good football player. Like he may not be a guy that you look at, Ryan, and say, boy, this guy's a future NFL draft pick. I don't know if that's something that you're going to think when you watch him, but you're just like, dude, this guy knows how to play quarterback.
Dynamic.
So it's a good group so far. I mean, and those are really the only quarterbacks I've seen in the 2025 class. So I don't know what the class is like nationally, but like if this 5 is indicative at all of what the 2025 quarterback class is like, it's going to be a heck of a class.
Yeah,
because those kids are good.
Because one kid that visited campus but doesn't have an offer is that Jamar. Have you seen Jamar Malone? That kid's talented too. He hasn't gotten an offer from Notre Dame yet, though.
There's that kid that throws righty and lefty, Mickey Groh. I'm not.
I haven't seen. I watched him like 2 minutes and I stopped.
Yeah, the Antoine Hill kid's very talented. He's like the Anthony Richardson of this class, but he's very raw.
He's the other tall kid. He's like 6'5". Yeah. He's a big
That's the kid you keep thinking. It's Antoine Hill. Excuse me,
Antoine Hill. Yeah,
that's the kid I think you keep thinking of.
He is talented though. He's got a lot of tools.
No doubt. Good question, Katie. Brandon Plesner. As of right now, Ryan, we have not seen any 24 kids get offered today. Correct? I haven't seen any 24.
Not that I've seen
offered today.
Nope.
All right, here we go. Here's one from John Mayernich.
John's question is: was the lack of success on the defensive line last year truly on Al Washington? Or was it Golden and Freeman? Is it possible it was a part of the defensive strategy by Golden? I'm wondering this. I mean, it's definitely part of it, John, for sure. I mean, we talked about the interior defensive line a lot yesterday, Brian, obviously, about, that some undersized defensive tackles were probably asked to do things that they shouldn't be doing, right? Like anchoring and playing and two-gapping and doing all those things consistently and not being more of an attack style. So that is a defensive system faults, right? So that you have to put something on Al Golden. But also, I mean, Al Washington needs, like, this is one of those things, John, where it's like everybody needs a little bit of blame here, right?
Yes.
I mean, they
but
weren't
the
used
position
well
coach
enough.
is always the guy at the top that you got to be able to look at and say, okay, and here's how you make the determination, Ryan. Is the group playing fundamentally sound football or not? If they're playing hard and playing fundamentally sound football, but things aren't working, you can usually point to it's one of two things. The system isn't really conducive to them being productive, or you just don't have very good players.
Right.
It's not a very good – I mean, do they have elite talent like George and Bam? No, they don't. I've never said that they do. They don't have the raw God-given tools that an Ohio State has on the D-line.
But
right?
It's
There's
still
no
good talent.
Jack Sawyer.
Yeah.
There's no JT. It's still really good talent, though.
Yeah.
And at least in the older classes. The younger classes has a few more guys that have that kind of potential, just not the floors that those guys have, but the ceilings are very similar. And say, okay, well, in other areas you say, maybe they don't have the players. I mean, how much am I really going to ask Jonathan Bonner to be a butt kicker? You know what I mean? Like, right. He does his job and he does it well. But last year was like you're seeing guys not playing fundamentally sound, guys not being gap consistent. You're seeing Isaiah Foskey develop. We hear all about the counter moves that he's developing, and then we get the games and he doesn't know how to use them. Well, that's partly coaching, it's partly the player. So there were things you could see from Al Washington to say he's got to do a better job. Do I think that all the issues with the D-line last year on Al Washington? No, I don't. My bigger issues with Al Washington are on the recruiting trail than they are necessarily coaching, to be completely honest with you. Now, my issue with Al Washington as coach is more about he's not doing a good job, based on hearing from several people, coaching the entire depth chart. And that's something Mike Elston was great at. The reason Notre Dame could lose starters and just plug and play like year after year post-2017 is because Mike Elston coached the entire depth chart. Al Washington's not doing that. And that's a big mistake. You can't be that way at Notre Dame. So I don't think he was really bad per se with the coaching of the D-line when it comes to the starters. I think a lot of that had to do with you have the system is asking things of them that you probably shouldn't be asking them to do. You had a couple veterans that weren't bought in the way that they needed to be bought in, which created some issues in the room. And you had a guy that wasn't doing enough coaching the entire depth chart. I mean, so it wasn't all him. But at the end of the day, yes, Al Golden's got to do a better job, Ryan.
Yep.
But Al Washington also has to do a lot better job, because you can't watch the film of Notre Dame's D-line last year and be like, yes, he's doing everything he can. The problem is over here.
Yep.
And, there's layers of accountability to that. And at the top is Marcus Freeman. He's got to do a better job of holding everybody accountable and getting more out of his assistant coaches. But when you're talking about a position coach, the first person that should be discussed when talking about it's got to get better is the position coach.
Sure.
It's plain and simple. And I'm just not sure why sometimes people are always looking for, well, let's not blame that guy, let's blame somebody else. Like, oh, it's ultimately – so every time a guy runs a bad route, let's blame Marcus Freeman. He's the head coach. Like, that's so lazy.
Yes.
Right? That's so lazy. And now, is it ultimately true? Yeah, everything that happens is on the head football coach. Sure. But that's just so lazy and unhelpful to do it that way. And we weren't like that with Brian Kelly either. I mean, if Jeff Quinn did a bad job, we didn't say Brian Kelly's the reason that the offensive line sucks every single game. It was, well, that's who you hired, right? And that's ultimately where Marcus Freeman is going to be judged is, okay, well, you've got these guys, they're doing the job or they're not. And if they're not, what are you doing about it? And what are you going to do to make it better? Those are the question marks that he's going to have to figure out and find answers for, Ryan. I mean, it's just the reality of it.
I just don't like making one person the whipping boy when everybody needs a little bit of accountability, right? Like, you need accountability. That's
Sure.
100%.
All right. Got some more here.
From John A1, the reverse seems to be more of an art to execute today. What makes a reverse play effective?
Well, that's a really good question. A lot of things. Number one is, what's the action? Yeah. I think when you see reverses that are ineffective, it's where it's so clearly a reverse because it's different alignment and action than you see in any other times. I think a couple keys are, number one, you've got to be a team. You know who was really good at jet sweeps in the last 4 or 5 years? Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Because they do a lot of motions and they do a lot of play action and movement off the jet action. So when you're handing that jet sweep off, you're not always sure that it's a jet sweep. And that light little bit of hesitancy is enough for them to get seals blocks and let that guy get outside. So you got to have You've got to have movement that gets you set. Now, that's key number one, right? Where the jet motion is like, you're going to use the jet motion. And it's also just as lame to have jet motion all the time and you don't hand the ball off ever. Like Notre Dame seemed to be that way for a while last year. They would run these motions and then never actually give that guy the football. And then the one time they do, they give to Jaden Thomas on 4th down. So, but the other thing is you've got leverage is important. How can you formationally get a team? There's 2 mistakes you can make. One is being too wide. And then you guys can run, they can funnel you back inside easier, and then inside out guys can come make plays. The other is to get too tight, where you're so tight that the cornerback's never going to come that far inside. He's going to see the jet, and he's just going to beat you to it. So a reduced alignment without getting into a bunch is the sweet spot for me, Ryan, to be honest with you, because you're getting leverage to down block, but you're also tight enough with your corner that you can pull your guards and stuff if you want to, or get a tight end maybe on some sort of like a wing motion, or a lot of teams will use like their running back. So bring a slot motion and like have an Audric Estime. Like if you remember the 50-yard touchdown Notre Dame had against LSU on a jet sweep in the 14 bowl game with Malik, the lead blocker on the perimeter was Torian Folston. CJ Procise was receiver. He comes on motion, gets the jet. Torian Folston made a really important block on the perimeter on that play that sprung CJ Procise free. So you got to have some way to create cross action. I think the best jet sweeps are the ones where you can kind of create some cross action from a blocking standpoint. Seal inside with the receivers, get a running back, a tackle, a tight end, or guard maybe going outside on a kick out of the corner who's going to come up. I think those are the more effective jet sweeps for me, Ryan. That's what I like about it. Reversals, I should say.
Yeah, and I would say this too, John. Another key thing that I think the people that usually aren't very good at reverses and kind of that misdirection also are people that aren't very good on the front side of the runs that they're choosing to run their action off of, right? It's like if I'm a team and you're running, let's just say it's, zone rights, and then you're running a reverse off of zone look or something. If you're not good at running zone rights, why am I like getting so like, oh my God, I need to get over here and I need to overcompensate? Because overcompensation is usually defensively is what gives up big plays on the backside. Like that's kind of where that stuff works off of. So I think it's being good in the action that you're running it off of, right? Whether it's a power look, whether it's a zone look, toss, like whatever it ends up being, you need to be good on the front side of these runs. The best teams are the ones where you're kicking their butts on the same play, and then the backside players need to overcompensate, and then that's where the reverses come out of. So I think that there's a lot of teams that run that type of misdirection and that type of reverse action almost out of desperation. And usually when you're running out of desperation, usually they suck at it, because it's like there's no like that the play action is not making you feel like you're threatened. If you don't feel like you're threatened, you're not going to overcompensate. You're not going to get frazzled. You're not going to, get out of your assignment and then mess up mentally, right? Mental mistakes are what usually lets that type of action spring. So I think just being really good on the front side of whatever run you're working off of is big time. And those teams that aren't predictable with that and are efficient with the run that they're playing are the ones that are usually a lot more successful off of that misdirection stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. Good questions. Here we go. We got some more here, Ryan.
Question from John Mayernich. With the success of Harrison Smith and Kyle Hamilton at safety in the NFL, which is far better than what any other school has in the NFL? Why aren't we doing better in safety recruiting?
That's a great question. I think part of it is they were doing good at safety recruiting, and they had some guys bust. I mean, Derek Allen busted out. Houston Griffith wasn't what we thought he was going to be.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it as well. But I mean, you had a guy that I don't think Terry Joseph was a very good recruiter. I mean, that's number one. I think he was a bad recruiter at Notre Dame. And number two, Chris O'Leary is a good coach, but he hasn't proven to be a good recruiter. I think it's really it's like running back, right? Remember when we had to listen to top running backs don't want to come to Notre Dame because of academics or whatever excuse people used. That was only relevant when Autry Denson was the running backs coach. That's the only time it was an excuse. Hey, look, Bernie Parmalee had no issue recruiting running backs. Tony Alford had no issue recruiting top running backs. He signed 2 top 100 running backs from Florida in the same class.
Wild.
He signed Josh Adams, Dexter Williams in the same class. Like, there was no issues there. He signed Theo Riddick and Sear Wood in the same class. Cameron Roberson, before the knee injury, was a top 200 back. I liked Cam Roberson a lot. Now, there were some years you had some misses and things, but that's always going to happen. But Autry Denson, Notre Dame could have had A.J. Dillon easily. They didn't get him because at the Irish invasion, Autry Denson told him, "You're a linebacker for us." And when Mike Denbrock heard that, he was pissed because he didn't think that. That was an Autry Denson thing. Even though at that same Irish invasion, he was the fastest kid there. He won the sprint contest. He smoked C.J. Holmes, who they ended up offering and taking. Smoked Deion Jackson, who also was better than C.J. Holmes. Another guy that Notre Dame could have had easily.
Who went to Duke.
He was at Irish invasion, looked great, and they went with C.J. Holmes.
I like Deion Jackson, man. He was a good player.
Me too. And he was a great kid too. And so those are not, top backs. No, you have someone here who can't recruit and doesn't want to recruit, puts no effort into recruiting. Then all of a sudden he leaves, Lance Taylor shows up, and all of a sudden you're signing Chris Tyree and Logan Diggs and Audric Estime, and then Dylan McCullough shows up and you get Jeremiah Love, and all of a sudden top running backs want to come to Notre Dame again. Shocker. I don't know why. Right? Yeah. So I think a lot of it has to do with that is get a guy there with a more proven track record as a coach or someone who's a really strong recruiter. Now, I'm okay with Chris O'Leary for now because he's a young coach who's learning. This is a big year for Chris O'Leary. He's got to do well in this class because if he doesn't do well in this class, you can't just be a good coach at Notre Dame, especially at a skill position. You got to be a good coach and a good recruiter.
Right.
And this is a big year for Chris O'Leary. He's got to step up and put a really strong safety class together because he had a good safety class last year, although he was not the primary driver of that. If we're going to be completely honest, he was part of it. He's got to do well with, the Kennedy Urlachers, the Davis Andrews, the Jalen McClains, and some of those other top guys that I like. I don't care what their rankings are. Those are guys that I think are really good football players. You got to start getting those guys. Because I also don't think safety is a position where Ryan, you and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
I don't think safety is a position where you have to get elite players. If you can, great. I mean, if you can get a Kyle Hamilton, great. I'm not saying don't recruit that guy. But if you're dominating up front and you don't necessarily need elite safeties. Notre Dame had one of the best safety tandems in the country in Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott. Undrafted kid and a 6th-round draft pick. And that year in 2018, they had one of the 5-6 best safety tandems in the country. No question.
Yeah.
So, but part of it was because they were really good up front that year. Like really good up front. And really good at linebacker that year. I mean, Notre Dame definitely also had one of the best front sevens in college football that year. I mean, both of your backup defensive ends on the 2018 team were drafted. Your backups. You had 5 defensive ends that have played in the NFL from that team, just defensive ends. And so, when you have a front seven like that, you can win with guys like that.
Yeah,
you better have a Kyle Hamilton. If you're not going to be really good up front. And that's the concern I have right now, Ryan. I'm more worried about the D-line recruiting right now than I am safety recruiting. A lot more concerned. Because you can also move a plethora from another position there, corner, receiver. I mean, your 2 starting safeties this year are most likely going to be a former cornerback and a former wide receiver.
Sure.
And
we expect them to be a pretty good pair if they develop.
Right. You're not converting a guard over to defensive line if you want to be good.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Agree.
So
that's a good note on like a couple, we think about some of the better defenses we've seen over the last 15-ish years. Like I think you remember those really good Alabama years, Brian. I remember Robert Lester was one of their best safeties. It's like, what did Robert Lester ever do in the NFL? He didn't do anything. Christopher Smith was a really good player out of Georgia. I like him, but he's not like a stud, look at this type of guy and going to be an all-pro in the next level. He's not that type of dude, right? I mean, so, yeah, you don't need that position to be elites. You really don't. It's just more about getting good football players. And Notre Dame needs to get more good football players at safety. There's no doubt about it. You need to get a 3-man class this year that has some good players in it. You need that type of group this year. You need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I got some more here, Ryan. Let's keep rocking and rolling. We'll get this last one from John A1, and then we'll have all the John A1 questions answered.
John's question, will we see a good amount of 22 personnel in 2023?
I don't think so. I don't know if that's the ideal. I think you could use it at times, definitely. There's a time and a place for that. I mean, get into a 3rd and 1, and you could really scheme up something really big for that type of thing, but it'll be a change up that you use occasionally in certain looks, but it's not going to be I hope it's not because that says a lot about the receiving core if that's a primary alignment they're going with.
They came out in that against it was Syracuse, right, where they put Audric Estime in at fullback and then ran the dive out of it
and had 2 tight ends.
Yeah.
I like those wrinkles. I love wrinkles like that. It's just not going to be something I say we're going to see a good amount of.
Yeah, and I want to get some more wide receivers on the field. So
yeah. This is really cool. Adam Shipley has a really cool note here. He says, random, but my daughter's high school band, which is Adams High School in South Bend, was asked to be the pep band for the Creighton girls tonight. Could you wish them luck? So obviously that meaning Notre Dame women's basketball team is hosting the NCAA tournament, the first 2 rounds in Notre Dame, and so Creighton's one of the teams that's going to be there. So yeah, man, that's awesome, Adam. I hope they have enjoyed themselves and have a good time. I've said this. I think bands. I'm not a big cheerleader person. I think bands are such an integral part of college sports. They really are. And I don't like that we don't have bands as much because we have more music and stuff that's blasted. But I love bands at football games and basketball games. I like the pep bands at basketball games. Those are awesome.
On the college level, especially. It's like the authentic. Yeah. It's like it feels like college football, to your point, right?
Yes.
Like,
and same with basketball. I love a pep band at a basketball game. I really do. I think those are a lot of fun. All right, Ryan.
You'll get the occasional Stanford cow where the band goes on the field and someone gets struck too.
Stanford's band is ridiculous. Anyway, I'm not sure where this comment came from, Ryan, but here's a comment somebody made that I want to get your thoughts on this because I have heard a lot of people kind of make this comment a lot lately. Joe Medina says, "I think Kelee Ringo is so overrated as a DB." What are your thoughts, Ryan?
I don't think he is anymore, Joe. I mean, I think that right now I would say it's more likely Kelee Ringo's the 5th corner off the board than being the 1st or 2nd corner off the board. So I don't think it's like super overrated. I think that his film was very up and down over the last 2 years. Like it just wasn't consistent at all. But I could still buy into Kelee Ringo as a talent, though. I would, man. If he's there in the late 1st round, early 2nd round, I would take him all day. Because, I mean, you can't teach that, man. Like that's 6'2", 200 plus pounds of 4.36. Like there's a lot of talent to work with Kelee. So was he overrated to begin the season as far as a draft prospect? Maybe slightly. Sure. I can get there with you. But right now, I don't think he's overrated at all because I think he's probably going to be the 4th or 5th corner off the board as it stands today.
Next question we have here from John Mayernich.
John says, you've just been given the job of NCAA president. What is the very first thing you do?
Change
the check, baby.
Change the transfer portal rules. Like, honestly, if they would say, hey, Brian, you can be the NCAA president for 3 years and you're not going to make a dime, I would take that job in a heartbeat. I would. I hate what they're doing to the college sports right now. Hate it. Yeah. The first thing I would do is I would change the transfer portal rules, like right away. And there's several changes that I would make. Number one is I'm back to sitting out a year. Graduates can train. I'm all about rewarding people for graduating college. All about that. Graduate transfers can leave right away. The other thing I would implement is a legitimate appeal process that if kids want to transfer and get a year back, you have that. But it's going to be very strict rules, and you have to provide a level of evidence to be able to transfer. So like what happened a few years ago or recently with Devin Upau from Notre Dame, I'm giving him a waiver. And I think waivers can also be granted by the school that the kid is leaving from. So because no one's going to know a kid's situation more than the coaches that are there. You have a kid, what's going on at home, and the kid wants to leave. You guys work together. And if you're willing to grant that, then you grant that. Because there's some schools that are going to say, hey, look, you're not playing for us. If you want to transfer, we'll help clear that road. So allow there to be that process. The other thing that I would do is if you transfer and you lose that year and you graduate, you get it back. So once you graduate, so you don't lose a season of eligibility. Like right now, if I redshirt as a freshman and then transfer the next year, I have to I lose my redshirt freshman year, I lose a transfer year. I only have 3 years to play.
Yeah.
If you graduate, I give you that last year back. You still have your 4 years. So it's now an incentive to stay and graduate and do well in the classroom and those kind of things. And you're not. That's the only thing that creates like sitting out a year is not punishment. It's not punishment. Losing a year of eligibility potentially by transferring is punishment. And so once you remove that, then it's no longer punishment as long as you graduate. Just go to class, get your degree. You don't have to be a 4.0 student. Just got to graduate. So that's something I would do. And the final piece for me, Ryan, is I would make it to where if a school makes you a promise, they better put it in your NIL. And if a school's not willing to put a promise in your NIL, then guess what? They're lying to you. And so to me, that is something that I would definitely have. And with this current, NIL stuff, name, image, likeness, these kids can have attorneys, they can have things. I would have a structure in place to where where kids can kind of go. The NCAA can have, if you want to, you can have you can have your own lawyer, your own agent, whatever, but also the NCAA will help you go through contracts, make sure that these things are all valid. Because if a school's not willing to put a promise to you, hey, we'll promise you're going to start, you're going to play 100 snaps, you're going to have number 7, you're going to do whatever, you're going to live in this dorm. If they're willing to promise you something, then they better be able to put it on paper. And if they're not willing to put it on paper, then they're lying to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so everything, if they're, and hey, I promise you this, promise you that, put it on paper. And if they break their terms of the contract, then you can get out and transfer right away. So maybe schools will stop lying to these kids about all these different things. So I think the current portal process is broken. And the final piece to this is if you get caught tampering, meaning having any type of, I don't care if it's a person who knows a person who knows a person, you better make sure you make it very clear to your boosters that if you all do anything to tamper with a recruit, we're done. We're screwed. You're getting fined 7 figures. And I would actually say you get no bowl money from yourself or your conference, and you can't get in the transfer portal for 3 years. I would put some serious teeth to that. And then that way, kids, you can't have any contact with the kid until he gets in the portal. You got to get into the portal before you can have any contact. And a school can't call the high school coach. You can't have any outside contact with a kid until he's in the portal, right? So those are all things that I would do. All things that I would do to make the transfer process a lot cleaner and more player-friendly, in my opinion. Because this is what we're saying now. This isn't player-friendly. This is not player-friendly. We're not doing right by these kids, just giving them whatever they want. There's this notion that, well, if a young person wants them, we should give it to them. If a young person thinks that they're this, we should just believe them. What? Like, so if your daughter says, no, Dad, I truly believe that my bedtime should be 12 o'clock at night. Well, okay, that's what she wants. That's what we're going to give her. Yeah, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. You know what I mean? Well, these kids, no, sometimes as adults, I need to be able to look back on a young person and say, I made this mistake as a young person.
Right.
I don't want you to have to go through that. Isn't that what parenting is supposed to be all about? Isn't that what leadership is? Hey, I suffered because I made a stupid and immature mistake when I was 18. I want to make sure you don't have to learn from that personally, learn from mine. And this notion of we're just going to give kids whatever they want is so stupid. And so it's just nonsense. We've lost our minds as a country. We really have. And it's indicative in sports of just, well, if a kid wants this, we'll just give it to him. No. If he messes up, that's his mistake. Really? We're just going to just throw kids to the wolves like that? That's really what we're going to do? Just we don't care anymore because we're so afraid of a lawsuit? F that. It's our job to lead. It's our job to fight for these kids. And even sometimes, Ryan, sometimes that means doing things that they may not like.
Right. Because
we have been there. We know. The previous transfer system was flawed because it was way too school friendly. You could tell a kid where he could and could transfer to. It was nonsense.
Wow.
A kid shouldn't lose a year of eligibility as long as he stays in class. We can fix all those things, right? But we need to be able to lead as the grown-ups in the room. We need to say, no, man. You may think that's what you want, but trust me, that's not good for you. And the fact that we have too many cowards that are unwilling to do that and too many people in the media that just want to placate to the players because it's this really weird pro-player thing when you're not really pro-player. No. You know what I mean? That's not pro-player at all. That's pro. That's pro. I want to be cool. I want to be liked. I want to be hip. Oh, I'm the cool guy that says players get whatever they want. No, you're an idiot and a coward. That's what you are.
That's funny. No, you're not wrong, though. I'm laughing because you're just so right, man. Tampering was my number one thing, Brian, and it's more just, we could talk about establishing the rules and figuring it out, but you have to start by caring about it, right? Yes. Like that's the first and foremost thing. It's the Wild West, man. Like I always pull back to the story of Tucker Kraft, who's a tight end in the 2023 NFL draft out of South Dakota State, literally told me on a podcast that he was getting tampered with by University of Alabama. They were offering him 6 figures, and he wasn't in the transfer portal.
Well, we heard that they offered Michael Mayer a ton of money too. I've heard from multiple people that are pretty connected to that.
It hurts college football so much because the big guys are just going to deplete the smaller guys, right? And I mean, It's so frustrating to me, man. Like, so you're not only hurting a player, you're also hurting a school. You're hurting a community. I mean, because like Tucker Kraft was a part of that program for 4 years, and all of a sudden he's just going to go to Alabama because he's getting offer in the bag and stuff. And like, if that's the decision he wants to make, that's fine.
Then let him go Tucker. In the portal. Exactly.
Yes, let him go in the portal. But he wasn't in the portal. He wasn't seeking this stuff out. It's literally just backhanded stuff in the back channels, and it's unacceptable. So, what exactly the rule is? We can talk about that all day. And I think there's a lot of merit to everything you said, obviously. And I'm sure other people out there have other ideas that I think also have merit to it, right? But at the end of the day, the NCAA needs to start caring about that type of stuff. It needs to start caring because right now it doesn't care. It's like, no, you do whatever you want. We'll be in the front. Like, we won't talk about it, right? And it's the untalked about stuff that is just killing college football.
Can I bring something else up? I'm so sick of people using the military as an example. If you join the Army and you leave, do you know what happens to you? You go to freaking jail. You're a deserter.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you can't just leave and transfer somewhere because you don't like it. So if you want to say, well, hey, if they're old enough to join the military, do you know what happens if you're serving and you decide, I don't want to do this crap anymore, I'm leaving? You can't do that. Yeah. So cool. We'll take the military approach and we'll make the punishment the same as it is for the military. Cool. Yeah. You want to do that? Send kids to jail? Put them in the brig because they're AWOL? Like, no, you're not making the example you think you're making.
Yeah.
Because you can't just leave the military willy-nilly. Because my drill sergeant yelled at me, I'm transferring to the Air Force. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that. You can't do that. So using the military as an example is really not a good thing for you because it's a lot easier to get out of playing football at Notre Dame than it is to get out of the Army once you've enlisted, with all due respect. You know what I mean? So I'm sorry, that's not a good example. No. There's nowhere in life, Ryan. If you, well, I won't use you an example because
you can use me. Kind of
weird.
No,
but
you're fine.
You have certain things in your contract that you just can't up and willy nilly leave and just go anywhere you want. There's some places you can go. It is what it is. But there's some places you can't go.
Right.
That adults do this all the time. We have to sign non-competes. I just can't leave for another business unless my contract allows me to do so. So, like when I left the first time and came back after coaching, I made sure I didn't sign a non-compete the next time because I wanted that freedom if I needed to have that freedom. So, okay, how bad do you want me here? If you're going to make me sign a non-compete, then I'm not coming. I'm going to go somewhere else, right? So, the reality is this is a unique thing. People think, well, a regular student can transfer somewhere. Okay, fine. But they're not athletes. They're not sport. They're not part of something. So this whole thing just frustrates the heck out of me. It really does frustrate the heck out of me. So, and they are signing contract. He says these guys, yes, they are. A national letter of intent is a contract. It's a contract that says you come here and you do this and we will pay for your scholarship. We'll pay for your tuition, room, and board. That's a contract. That's absolutely a contract. So they are signing a contract, which is why I've said there needs to be specific language in that contract that if a school promises a player the number 7 jersey, playing time, dorm, whatever, it should be part of that contract. Yeah. And it shouldn't just be a standard blanket. There should be a standard contract that every kid signs. That's the terms of, for that, the NCAA regulates that. But then there's an addendum page that is between the kid and the school. We promise you that you're going to be able to move off campus after your first year. We promise you the number 7 jersey. We promise you that you're able to do this. We promise you that you're going to play at least 100 snaps this year. We promise you that you're going to be able to stay, do whatever the case may be. Whatever. We'll travel to everywhere. Whatever they're going to promise you. That's on the addendum page. And if the school doesn't meet its need, then the kid can leave. He's free to leave at the end of that story. No sit out, no nothing. Right? That's fine. I'm cool with that. Because you violated your contract.
Yep.
Right? Like, Ryan, you have your non-compete we talked about, right? But if I decide I'm not going to pay you and you say, well, I'm going to leave. I'll say, well, you can't leave. You're in a non-compete. And we went to court. Guess who would lose? I would. Because I didn't hold up to my end of the agreement. Because I wasn't paying you what I promised you I was going to pay you. Right? Same thing. If you left, I'd get certain things because you didn't live up to your end of the agreement. And so why do we always say, well, we're going to hold these kids. No one acts like this. Nobody allows this.
Yeah.
And it's a flawed system and we're not helping these kids.
No,
we're not. We're not helping these kids by doing this.
Making it easy to leave as easy as they do now is not helping anyone. It's not, to your point.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It just makes you feel better as someone who wants to be pro player. It makes you feel better about yourself, but it doesn't help the players.
Yeah.
It doesn't help the players.
I mean, I'm not trying to keep a player in a position or in a place that makes them, mad or angry or makes, hurts their mental health. Like, I mean, that's not the situation I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the first thing that something happens, you could just leave anytime, man. Like, what character do you build off of that? Like, you don't build any character. Right. I mean, I don't know. I just don't get
it. People say, well, normal students can transfer. If I go to a school and I have a scholarship for something, there's language in that scholarship. I have to live up to a certain standard to maintain that scholarship.
Yep.
Right. So there's standards for everybody that they have to live up. I have to maintain a 3.0 GPA or I lose my scholarship.
Yep.
Right. As a normal student. But yet with athletes, we're just letting them do whatever they want willy-nilly. That doesn't help them. Tom Izzo had a great comment on this the other day. He goes, we're not teaching these kids how to handle adversity anymore. We're not. My coach isn't. He started talking about all these players would have. Think about how many great Notre Dame players would have transferred if because they weren't playing a lot, they weren't playing the position they wanted, they weren't doing this, they weren't doing that,
or a coaching change.
Yeah. Now, see, that's something for me. Coaching changes. I've said I'm opening those kids up. My thing is I'm giving a 30-day window.
Yeah.
To that new coach to talk to players, and he can either release them right away. Hey, we don't have plans for you. Here's the sign. I'm signing your release form. You can go right now. Give them a window. Maybe it's 2-3 weeks, whatever, to kind of stay there and make the case for the kids that are currently on the team before the transfer portal windows opens up, right? Because that's the other thing too. Is I think we need to change the transfer portal window. But yeah, if a head coach leaves, those kids should be able to have certain freedoms, right? But I also think the new coach should have some sort of a window to say, hey, look, here's why I want you to stay. Here's my vision for you. And if the kid says no, then he can leave. Exactly. And not have to sit out of here, because maybe that'll make you think twice about firing Dan Mullen halfway through a season when the dude was just in the freaking SEC championship a year ago. Right? Like, okay, well, that's cool because all your players can leave now if they want. All of them.
And you're not in a great situation right now off of that situation.
No, you're not. You're not. You're not. All right. Here we go. Let's get back on track here a little bit. Got me fired up.
We got from Kaiser Sose, says, do you guys
Kaiser Sose. Come on now. Have you not seen Usual Suspects?
No, I haven't. I don't know what that is.
Ryan's fired.
Sorry, I don't know what that is. I'm sorry.
You've never seen the movie Usual Suspects?
Never heard of it.
Oh my God, I'm so disappointed.
What is it?
It's a movie. It's
I mean, like, who's in it? Ever. What is it from?
Kevin Spacey is in it. One of the Baldwin brothers is in it. It's a really good movie. Okay. Benicio del Toro's in it. It's a really good movie. Okay. Very good movie.
I'll add it to the list.
What's his name? The guy from Bronx Tale. What's his name? Chaz Palmieri's in it.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah. Chaz Palmieri's in it. It's a really good movie. Okay. Really good movie.
Add it to the list there. Do you guys believe, or have you heard that with the new offensive coaching staff, we will actually be seeing the best and highest potential players on the fields?
I mean, right now, Ryan, it's all words. We need to see it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, every staff says the right things, and I'm cautious. I'll say this: I'm cautiously optimistic. That's where I'm at. Cautiously optimistic.
Sames.
Yep. Cautiously optimistic. All right, let's get down to the next one here.
From Archer, resident Ohio State fan, if you two were to draft the offense and defense roster separately, who would be your top 10 on each side? Ooh, like a spring game kind of deal?
Would be top that. 10?
Are we about to do a snake draft right now? Is this about to happen?
No, I mean, top 10 on offense and defense separately. I mean, offense, it's Sam Hartman, Blake Fisher, Joe Alt, Billy Shrouth, Zeke Correll, Mitchell Evans, Tobias Merriweather, Deion Colsey. That's 8, right? See here, Deion Colsey. I'd probably go Jaden Thomas and any of the backs. Pick a back.
I'm telling you, man. Archer wanted us to do a snake draft here. He wanted a snake draft, but
that'd be fun to do on the board.
He said alternating picks. He wants it to happen.
Yeah, that's not something we're gonna do here. We can do that on the board though.
Yeah.
That'd be a fun thing to do on the board.
They should open it up to Notre Dame media one year, and we have a snake draft to decide who's on each side of the blue gold game. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. Like half the media is on draft for one team, half the media's on, that'd be a lot of fun. They'll never do that, but
I know they wouldn't, but it'd be awesome. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Talk about being different. That would be really different, and I would love every second of it.
Yep. All right, here we go. Let's get to the next one here. NH says Chad Bowden for GM. Honestly, Ryan, I've heard this before. I don't know if I'd want Chad as GM. I want him being able to do what he does now. My only concern
more money
is,
in his pocket.
That's right. My concern is if you bring in a GM and he wants to try to tell everybody what to do like that, I'm not down for that. I'm not, because Chad needs to keep doing it the way he's doing it, right? And a GM, I don't want to see a GM that's going to come in and be what like an NFL GM. It's going to have that. I want a GM that's going to, hey, you make sure everybody's on the same page. That's your job. You're making sure everybody's on the same page. You're not bossing people around. You're making sure everybody's on the same page. I think that's what I would rather see. I don't want to see something like this. I think the GM thing to me is a little bit overplayed and overdone for what this job should be. To me, it should be you should already have it. It's the director of player personnel. I mean, that's what this job should be. It should not be a GM. I think that's something that's in the figment of Jack Swarbrick's imagination, that he has this grand plan that's going to be cool. And it's just another job for him to get one of his lackeys to come in and have a hammer in the football program so you can have more control of the football program. That's how I see it. I have zero faith that Jack Swarbrick's going to make that hire correctly. None.
I'm really interested to see how much power the general manager will have, to your point, Brian, because I mean, the general managers I know, to your initial point, is the ones running the NFL where they have complete authority over the roster, right? Like they can do whatever the heck they want with the roster. If they wanted to make a trade, usually those get signed off with the head coaches, but a general manager can do that if he wants to, if he's being just like backhanded as far as like making a trade if he wanted to, right? So how much power, I guess, the general manager has is going to be an interesting conversation to see. Yeah. I don't know what that answer is.
I have a bad feeling, knowing Jack Swarbrick and just his track record, that it's just going to be a way for him to kind of put someone that he can control into the football program. That's my concern.
That would be the worst case scenario.
Would that shock you at all?
No,
with what he's done and what you and I know of publicly and privately that he's done? No, it wouldn't at all. Yeah, it wouldn't at all. So that's why that position concerns me, to be completely honest with you.
Yep.
All right, Ryan, let's move on to the next one.
From Broke Neck Boy, would you prefer the green jerseys for the Ohio State game or the USC game if you had to choose?
Oh, Notre Dame, Ohio State for sure.
It's Ohio State.
Notre Dame's green jersey success against USC has been a little hit or miss.
True.
My lifetime anyway. You know what I mean? I've got some bad memories. Very, very bad memories of the green jerseys. 05 being the biggest one. First Notre Dame game I ever went to, they wore the 77 throwbacks and they got annihilated like 38-0. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Who are they playing that one?
USC.
Got it.
USC. Yeah. So no, they didn't actually say in that release, I don't believe, that they're definitely wearing green jerseys, but they did the thing last year that if you're going to wear green, the team should also wear green, so I mean, I guess that means they're going to wear green for that game as well, which is cool. I'm curious to see what green they actually go with. That'll be interesting. Very interesting. So I didn't love, it's the pants, man. I'm telling you, if they would go white pants, green jersey, gold helmet with gold cleats and gloves, that would be so sweet. That would be so under the lights. Yeah, under the lights, because it'll be a night game.
I'm having a hard time visualizing it for some reason. Like I'm trying to visualize it in my mind.
It'd be so amazing. So amazing. I asked my wife. Notre Dame was going to wear green jerseys for a game this year, right? Green jerseys, the green jersey they have with the gold helmet with white pants, gold cleats, and gold gloves. Tell me that. Yeah, my wife digs it. My wife digs it. Yep. See, she just said that's awesome.
So that's the way it needs to be then.
Yes. As long as she's happy, that's all that matters.
Happy wife, man. Happy wife.
That's right. Sadie's down here too. So got the whole family down here for the mailbag now. So Here we go. Let's get to some more questions here. Speaking of green jerseys.
Yep, from Chris Ayers. Am I bad that I don't like it when Notre Dame goes green? I don't love it usually. I don't know.
I dig it. Look, I'm all for Notre Dame mixing up their jerseys. I do. I
agree there.
And I like green. I wish green was more a part of their jersey. I've said this before. My normal jersey for Notre Dame, I would have like the blue and the gold with like green gloves and green cleats. I like the green as, you know, I think you can overdo it.
Yeah.
You know, like the 2015 uniforms in person were sweet. They look so good in person, but then on TV they look like crap because you couldn't see the numbers and the names because they were all green. You got to do it right, and I don't like the gold, the ugly gold, because you know I don't like those pants anyway. But you have those with the green and the gold. I just don't love those. I think there's been some green uniforms though that I really like, and when they use the green correctly, it's really sweet. And so that's why I say, man, the white pants with green jerseys and gold helmets would be so sweet.
Maybe it's because I've grown up a Philadelphia Eagle hater, but I have learned to dislike the color green. I think that might be what it is.
That's a darker green. Kelly green,
I know.
like
it's not the same shade.
Like really, I think a lot.
Yeah,
pops a lot. It's like more like the Boston Celtic green. You know, it's more like that.
I don't mind some green to accent things. I just maybe just as the main color. I'm not a big fan of. So.
Only as a throwback. I wouldn't want green to be the main color all the time. I just like one game a year. I kind of like that. You know, the whole stadium's green. The players are in green. I think that's pretty cool, man. I do. You know, especially if you can start getting Notre Dame fans more on board with actually everyone wearing green. They did a decent job of the games. Well, and then of course, like, you know, Penn State. Do you know how they get everyone to wear white? They give everyone a white shirt, correct?
Sure.
Isn't that how they do it?
But
Notre Dame won't do that. Notre Dame won't do that. No. They're not going to give anything for free. That's not Notre Dame.
I give Penn State very little credit sometimes, man, but the whiteouts are pretty sick. It's pretty sick when they have a whiteout game.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Let's go to Tom Connor.
If they break out, what unit would be the most important? To me, it's the defensive line. If they're decent, 9 to 10 wins. If they're really good, Notre Dame makes the playoffs. Defensive line's a big one. It's a big one, Tom.
Yeah.
Quarterback is a big one. I mean, we can't just discount.
We were asked this yesterday. I mean, look, you put Sam Hartman on last year's football team, and I think they're at worst 11-1.
Agree there.
Yeah. Sorry, at worst. They're probably a playoff team last year, just with him. So I think that's the biggest one. I think
it's quarterback.
Just huge.
And we have such high expectations of what Sam Hartman's going to do. But at the end of the day, look, we still need to see it, right? We've never seen a Notre Dame uniform, so you still need to see it. But defensive line's a great one, Tom. I mean, you need defensive line to take a massive step forward. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. Here's an interesting one, Ryan.
John asks, you have just become the new athletic director for Notre Dame. What are the first two things you do?
Here, first thing I do, Mike Mickens gets a huge pay raise.
Yes.
Daylan McCullough gets a pay raise. Chancey Stuckey gets a pay raise. Chad Bowden gets a pay raise. That's first things first.
Yeah.
I'm doing whatever I need to do, talking to donors, whatever, to up the overall salary structure of the staff. And then Marcus Freeman can decide what to do with it. Because it's not just for, I mean, Mickens and those guys absolutely need pay raises, but also I want to make sure that Freeman has the ability to expand the back office stuff as well. I'm raising money, and it would be so easy to do this. Raise an extra $10 million a year for them to expand that back office. No problem. Or allocate some of the tons of money that the program makes. Hey, how about we avert 10 million of it to this football team, the actual football team. Imagine that, right? A crazy concept. There's a lot of different things I would do there. I'd have to find out the specifics of the budget and different things. Like, okay, can we allocate this money from other places? Do we need to raise it? Whatever we need to do, we're getting it done. It done. That's the first thing, to expand the entire on-field and off-field staff. That's the first thing. I'm going to do that. Next thing I would do is, as the AD, I'm reassigning Ron Paulus. I'm reassigning Dave Poloquin outside of the football office. They're out of the football office. For me, those are a couple of the first things that I would do. The first things that pop in my head, and then I'm going to have some fun with the schedule moving forward. That'd be the next thing. Is I'm going to look at the schedule and be like, okay, we're dropping Stanford. Okay, no more Stanford. So that's done. I would have a heart-to-heart conversation with USC and say, okay, here's the deal. You guys are going to the Big Ten now, so there's a good chance you're going to be playing in November in the snow. So here's what you're going to do. This whole playing here in the middle of October crap is for the bird. That's gone. That's done. We're playing you last game of the year here and there. Because, hey, you can't avoid playing in the cold now because you're in the Big Ten. You're going to be in. So you're going every year, last game of the year, our place. You're coming here last game of the year every year, like we have to go out to see you after Thanksgiving every other year. That would be another thing I would flat out do right now. Because do you want to be playing in South Bend in the late November where you kind of have an idea of what's going on, or do you want to get stuck playing in Happy Valley or Rutgers or someplace like that in the last week of November? That's what I would do. Flat out.
I'm 100% on board with getting some of the assistant coaches and staff members more compensation if they are exceeding expectations, right? Because you mentioned guys that are exceeding their pay grade at this point. I mean, Brian, we just went through a whole offseason, man, where you lost a couple coaches, but then there was a couple other coaches that you're like, man, they might leave because you had to make it a more attractive job, man, from a compensation perspective.
Don't wait till they get interest from somewhere else to offer them a pay raise.
Exactly.
Right? Like I was told, hey, look, when as soon as Mason was getting contacted by the Colts, we told him we'll do whatever we need to do to get. How about you do that beforehand? Ohio State has now, I believe, has 5 assistant coaches making 7 figures.
That's wild.
Notre Dame has what, 1? Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they have any at this point in time because Tommy Rees left and Heastan left. I don't know if they have any. I don't even know if Heastan was making it. I don't know if they have any that are making $1 million.
Probably
at this point
they probably don't. They probably don't.
So,
I might think it through my mind. That's wow.
Yeah. So that's they're doing better than they used to, but not nearly good enough. Nearly good enough. And that's 100% on the athletic director. 100% on the athletic director.
Yep.
So, yes, that would be a big change.
Make it more attractive for good coaches to stay. That's all it is.
Well,
man.
The other thing, too, is I would, as an AD, here's another thing that I'll do. I would have a different I'd have a contract for the uniforms. I'd have an apparel deal for the uniforms, and I'd have a different apparel deal for shoes. That's something I would definitely do for me, right? That would be something I would do. I would work hard to get Notre Dame to CBS or Fox as my new TV deal and away from NBC. Flat out, I would work hard to do that. May not happen. NBC may still be the best deal, but I would work hard to make that happen. And then the other thing I would do is I would change uniforms. I would make some changes. I would modernize the uniforms a little bit. I would. But that'd be part of the apparel deal. Sure. And give the staff a little bit more freedom to, have some fun. I'm not all for crazy alternate uniforms every year, but I mean, give me that one game where we can use an alternate uniform at home. And that's where I say, like, get the white pants, the green jerseys, and the gold helmets kind of thing, right? Mix things up like that. I think that stuff's fun. But more often than not, I'm the traditional blue and gold. I like that. But I'd like to have a little bit more fun with that. I would. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Those are all things that I would do if I was the athletic director. So, which I'll never be. So, but still, it's fun to think about. All right. Let's see here. David Lowe, here we go.
David Lowe says, do y'all see Notre Dame taking any players in the portal in the spring? After the spring, David, it's possible. I mean, I think Notre Dame's going to see how some things shake out, like I mean, we talked about the safety position for one, right? Now that Brandon Hillman's no longer, part of the program moving forward, it's like, could you be in the conversation for safety after spring? Depends, but did Clarence Lewis move to safety? Did Ryan Barnes? Did the safeties take a step forward? Did they, remain healthy coming out of spring? Like, there's a lot of factors that kind of go into those decisions. Interior defensive line is a conversation that people are all going to have. But I also think that it's a good balance for me, Brian, because it's like I'm always going to be open to it, right? Like, if a really good player hits the portal and the fit makes sense, like, yeah, I'm going to explore that opportunity, that conversation. But I'm not going to force a number if I am settled with what we have on the roster just to add a player, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense. Yes, it does make sense. All right. We got a super chat here from Nathan Milton, Ryan. And let's see here. He had a follow-up to that. Gotcha. To clarify, I think something he said was not, he wanted to say something different. So and I did not put the clarification in here. So just give me 1 second. So he said he meant 22 season 22 for season. The excuses.
Gotcha.
That's what the clarification was.
All right. So from Nathan Milton, he says, do you think 2024's class is the best in the last do you think 24's class is best in the last 20 years? Will end up being best 20 years. What excuses? I know, man, I can't read right now. My apologies.
I wasn't shaking my head at you. I was shaking. I was kind of already starting to answer the question. Yeah.
What excuses would Brian Kelly have used for the 2022 season if still coaching at Notre Dame? IB has great team. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that, Nathan.
2024.
As of right now, no, I don't think it'll be their best class in 20 years. I'm not even sure it's going to be better than the 23 class. I mean, because like last year at this time, look, I'll just say this: they got to get going. They got to get going. If Al Washington and Al Golden step up to the plate and Chris O'Leary step up to the plate, then it'll have a chance, no doubt.
Yep.
But that's the area I'm just not as optimistic about as it being better than last year's class. Certainly don't think it's going to be better than the 08 or the 13 class. Now, it's got a chance to be really good, and it's off to a great start. But they got to close. And I'm just right now, like Ryan, you and I can sit here and talk. Outside of Cole Sullivan, is there a linebacker that's like, yeah, they're going to get that guy? Is outside of Bryce Young, maybe the Smith twins, and that's even a maybe. Is there any big-time defensive lineman you're like, yeah, they're definitely going to get that guy? Now, do I still think that they've got a really good shot with Justin Scott? Of course I do.
Yeah.
But am I optimistic that Al Washington's going to win that battle? No, I'm not.
Sure.
And so that's the thing is I just those guys got to step up and get the job done, in my opinion. And also, it's hard for me to have them have the best class ever when I just don't think it's a great year nationally.
Yeah,
I just don't think that 24 is a great year. And so they're going to have to – the reason that matters is you're going to have to hit on an even higher percentage of the guys you want to have that great class in a year like this, in my opinion, right? Because I'm not talking about recruiting rankings. I'm talking about just you and I being able to evaluate the film and evaluate the team and say, yeah, that's a great year.
Because
that's what I mean.
Because to your point, there's a realistic chance that Notre Dame has a better point total on like 247 Sports, for instance, this year than last year, but that wouldn't necessarily be indicative that it is a better class than last year. It's just that guys maybe are ranked higher because it's not as deep a class as maybe what it was in 2023. If that makes sense, Milton. I hope that does make sense. But so I think that there's some context. I mean, at the end of the day, man, like we're going to sit down and we're going to discuss this, in volume, obviously, right? When the final number comes out, but I think it has a shot, right? Like there's a shot, but you have to hit on Justin Scott. You got to hit on a couple of the impact receivers on the board. Maybe you make headway on the officials with Elijah Rushing, for instance, and like that flips the script a little bit, right? Like that would be very monumental potentially for Notre Dame. So a lot of dependent.
Ryan, we're really down on Al Washington, but here's the reality. Al Washington, and I'm gonna the article I referred to, I'm gonna have it up tomorrow. It's gonna come up tomorrow, but it's basically like, okay, I've been down on Al Washington. It's a big year for him. Here's what he can do to win over Notre Dame fans and just lay out some things. There are guys on the board for him to completely change the narrative as a recruiter. Yep. And you already mentioned them, right? If he gets Justin Scott and Elijah Rushing with Bryce Young and Owen Wafel, dude.
Yeah.
Bro, great job. Great job. Yep. If you go out and get the most out of the Vipers that they're capable of, if you're able to do the things we've talked about yesterday, breaking down the D-line, Al Washington go from a guy that's a whipping boy by fans, rightfully so, him and Al Golden both, to okay, dude, hey, you're killing it, man. You're doing a great job. Get her done. Keep doing it. And there's guys in this class that he has a chance to do that with. Yeah. I would say I'd still want to see, maybe one more guy, maybe a 50 lineman in this class, and who would that be? I don't know. But
I mean, if you get Elijah Rushing, Justin Scott, Owen Wafel in the same class, because like all those guys have high floors.
I have Owen Wafel as a top 150 guy. Yeah. I like Owen Wafel a lot after watching his junior film.
And all those guys,
a high ceiling guy like Bryce Young with that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to say if you have three of those guys that have higher floors too, like I mean, there's a pretty high percentage that Justin Scott's going to be a dude on the next level, right? Like there's a pretty high percentage. Owen Wafel is at least going to be a good starter, most likely during his Notre Dame career. Elijah Rushing has a pretty high floor. You can take a gamble on maybe a toolsier dude. Like, I mean, maybe this isn't a perfect example, but like maybe a Malachi Williams is a guy that like a 210-pound defensive end right now, but like, come on over, brother. Like, let's develop that.
Mayo. There's a lot of those low floor. high ceiling guys. It's just right now I don't have any faith that he's going to do that.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to, guys, is I just don't have any faith that right now, as of right now, based on what we know, hopefully this changes. I don't have a lot of faith that Al Golden and Al Washington get that job done. And same with Chris O'Leary, if we're being honest. I mean,
sure.
The only guy on defense right now that has any kind of proven track record, and Archer was kind of talking about this in the chat, and this is one of the concerns I had about Al Washington. So, well, he did look at the linebacker class he had at Ohio State last year. They were all Ohio guys.
Yeah.
Like if you can't recruit Ohio guys at Ohio State, like you're in the wrong profession. So I don't put as much stock in that. And so to me, it's like it's possible they could have a great class, but it just means those three guys on defense, the only guy other than Mike Mickens, who has just been a phenomenal at Notre Dame, I just don't think those other three guys are dudes that have pulled their weight on the recruiting trail right now. And they need to. There's plenty of time to do so, but they need to get going. That's the big thing.
Very fair.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. That's a good one, Nathan. Very good one.
From Archer, says Kerryon Johnson claimed his football career is over at age of 25 due to playing for military general Matt Patricia. Should players force trades to sit out if their coach is a risk to their career?
Yes, but that opens up such a can of worms, though. I mean, that's the reality of it is, look, should you force traders sit out if it's a risk of your career? Yes, you should. Yeah. But you also have to understand that with that means you could potentially be sacrificing money if the team chooses not to trade you and then you don't get paid. But if you're thinking, hey, me doing this is going to save me because I'm going to be free agent in a year and it's going to help prolong my career on the back end. Okay, you're making that financial calculus, right? And that's fine. I support that. You have a right to do that. You have a right to not have to go to work. You just don't have a right to not go to work and still expect to get paid. I mean, so how strong are you about that? How willing are you to walk away because of a situation like that? So yes, if you genuinely feel that my health is a risk because of the way this guy coaches, you should absolutely take a stand. And here's how you get it done. Get enough of your teammates to do it with you. We're all sitting out. This guy is he ain't it. And so to me, if 15 players said, hey, we're not playing for this guy, and then made their case to the owner, you know what the owner would probably do? Probably fire the coach. That's probably what he would do, or at least require some changes.
So I saw Archer said that he claims that playing for Patricia cost him 2 knee injuries and a neck injury. Why is that? Archer, can you give me some context there? Is that playing? I'm confused on how he can blame the injuries on the coach. Like I genuinely just don't know.
Here's how it could. I don't know the specifics of the situation, but if there are certain, here's a couple different ways. Number one is you have a coach who demands that you get on the field. Coach, I'm my knees. No, freaking get out there. Stop doing whatever.
Sure.
Or a guy who has practices that are just above and beyond what they should be physically. I mean, there's things like that he could do.
He seems like that type of guy.
Or you hire a bad strength coach who doesn't know what he's doing. Look, guys, there's bad coaches at every level, and that includes the NFL. I mean, you hear the Ravens people talking about how bad their strength program is and how it's cost them injuries and things like that. And I don't know if that's true or not, but this isn't a thing that's like would surprise some people. So if it's something like that, then sure. Yeah, sure. But if it's just I randomly got hurt 3 times, and I blame that guy because he's a jerk. But I mean, I do believe there's times where it's like, look, this guy's doing things that are putting us at risk. Like there's more players stepping up and say, hey, guys, stop taking shots to be able to play. I support that, actually. I do. And I know a lot of people won't agree with that. But look, if you're someone who says, hey, you know what, playing every game is worth me basically being decrepit by the time I'm 40, you have a right to make that decision. But if some guys are saying, hey, man, I'm not going to dull the pain and continue to do further damage to my body, so when I'm 35 years old, I can't pick up my child because my shoulders are shot. I'm not doing that. They have a right. They should have a right to do that, in my opinion. It's just but here's the problem. Anytime you go that route, there's going to be some knucklehead or knuckleheads that's going to use that as exactly. Yeah. So then they get their money and then they sit out because I have a bruised pinky, so I can't play for the next 4 weeks. And so there's got to be limits to player power, right? but they're also it doesn't need to, it shouldn't be like it was 40 years ago either, Ryan.
Yeah,
like, we got to find a happy medium where we're the best way for these leagues to work. The best way for college football to work is where the people in charge are saying we got to do things to protect the teams and we got to do things to protect the players. And if we can find the best way to make both of them as happy as we can, but also know that they're going to be upset about things, and I'm doing my job. And that's the only way you can have a healthy organization, in my opinion. Like, the NBA is way too there's way too much player power in the NBA. And I think it's hurt the product, in my opinion. It's unwatchable for me at this point in time. Other people will disagree.
Management, too much load
management. Other people will disagree to me, and that's fine. But that's just my opinion.
Sure.
But at the same time, I don't think it should be like it was 40 years ago either. Sure. And so you got to be able to find that happy medium, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate you, Archer, for giving a little bit of context. If people are kind of listening on the podcast platform, he kind of filled us in. It was more about the practices, and kind of Brian hinted at that a little bit. It's one thing that could be the potential, and then
playing through
injuries, and I mean, yeah, man. It's such a fine line between the kind of doing too much and then doing too little, right? I mean, but I will say this: just Matt Patricia's a doofus. Like, he's a doofus. I mean, that's just all it is, right? I mean. So, Kerryon Johnson had a really terrible experience, and feel really bad that he had to go through that, man, because Matt Patricia is a doofus. But to your point, Brian, like, there is a fine line between too much power in that situation. There is. Yeah. There absolutely is, because people will take advantage of it, man. Like, give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Like, that's just kind of where it is. So,
I want to clear something up. We got to get back to Nathan's. We didn't answer the second part of Nathan Milton's question about the BK excuses. So we'll get back to that. Yeah. But I wanted to make sure that I wanted to clear this up here from Tom Burke real quick. Says, I know Brian doesn't like all green. I like it with gold letters. So let's make sure that we're clear on this. I said those 2015 uniforms that were all green looked really sweet in person. The problem was the letters were also like kind of that way, or the numbers were, and you couldn't really see them. And so it was impossible to see them. Like, I think they were like blue, like dark blue, and they really blended with the green. And they're like, they looked really bad. Actually, I'm going to look at I'm going to try to find the uniforms for that, because I remember the numbers were like they were a dark color. Yeah, they were like blue with like gold trim. And so when you were far away, you couldn't see the names and the numbers on the back of their jerseys, but up close, they looked sweet. They were probably my favorite, like on the mannequin jerseys. That was my only thing. I have no problem with all green. It's just not something that I would do all the time.
Right.
That's because you can do it right and you can do it wrong. I mean, I'm a Celtics fan, so I all green uniforms. I grew up liking that. It's just, you got to be able to see the numbers in the jerseys. And it was really hard to do that from there, in my opinion. Let's go back to the second part of Nathan Milton's question.
And the question was, what excuses would Brian Kelly have used for the 2022 season if still coaching at Notre Dame?
So here's the thing about what I would say about it. I think if Brian Kelly was still the head coach at Notre Dame in 2022, they would have had a one-game better record. And here's what I mean by that. I think they'd still beat Marshall, and they'd have beat Stanford. Because Brian Kelly didn't lose those games. Let's be honest. He did not lose to inferior opponents. But I also don't think they would have beat Clemson, and I think they'd have got blown out by Ohio State. I mean, again, if I'm going to give him the positive track record for winning those games, and I can't then assume he's going to win these other games or even be competitive in games he was never competitive in.
So they're going to be. So in this hypothetical, you think that they're 10-3. They end up 10-3, and they lose to the three big pillar games that we talked about.
Correct, and have two of them are blowouts. Yes. Yeah. Now, his excuses would have been, look, they were a lot younger this year than they were in 21 when he constantly whined about how young the team was. So my quarter. Like, remember, we've praised Marcus Freeman for never blaming Tyler Buckner's injury on their lack of success, and he had every reason to do so. Never once did it. Brian Kelly would have talked about that every single chance he had. We're young. Our quarterback went down. We lost Avery Davis. We lost Joe Wilk. We lost all these guys. Of course, we're going to lose some games. Winning's hard. Winning's very hard. We'd have heard that crap all year. Marcus Freeman never made excuses for the games they lost. He owned it every time and then tried to fix it. So they'd had a better record, but his excuses would have been youth and injuries. Absolutely. Youth and injuries, in my opinion. 100%. You agree with that, Ryan?
Yeah, I do. Because that was always the thing about Brian Kelly. I mean, you hit on it perfectly. They're going to beat the teams they should, and they're not going to look overly competitive against the teams that they need to beat in order to take it to the next level.
Ohio State would have destroyed Notre Dame in the opener if Brian Kelly was still the coach.
Yeah,
but they'd have bounce back and beat Marshall. So, I mean, I guess that's the give and take is what would you rather have had?
Yeah.
Probably
still wouldn't have looked overly impressive against Marshall, but they would have beaten Marshall, right? Yeah. To your point. So,
yeah. All right. Next one. Here we go. Let's go from, we had the one from Archer. Here's a good one from Eric Grant, Ryan.
Eric says, what's your over-under on number of freshmen that see the field 3.5 games, not counting mop-up time?
I'm going over. I think we're going to see more than 3.5.
Oh, 3.5 players, I said games vaccinated.
Yeah, 3.5. I'm gonna say over because I think I'm gonna include special teams in that.
Yeah.
But I think we're gonna see at least one DB, Ryan, play a decent amount this year. I think we're gonna see at least one offensive skill player play this year. I think that we'll see at least one offensive and one front seven player play a lot this year on offense and defense. And then I think we're going to see some other guys on special teams. So that's where I'm going with it. I'm going to say over.
I would say
slightly over on players, but not including special teams, slightly over, including special teams, definitely over.
Yeah. I think wide receivers, you have 1 to 2 guys that will play a little bit this year. I think Jeremiah Love is a wild card to maybe potentially play some special teams this year for Notre Dame when he gets on campus. I think that I agree. The defensive backfield, Christian Gray or Ben Minich in some capacity, whether that is special teams. So that's 4 right there. And I'm not even going to like Devin Houston, who's a possibility, right? And yeah, so I'll go over as well.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. So I'm going to go over on that one.
And then if your injuries at tight end don't get better or someone goes down, I mean, don't count out Cooper Flanagan.
You know what?
Playing
That's
a little
another
bit.
one, Ryan. yeah, as a blocker, he's a guy that I could see playing as a freshman. Even if tight ends don't get hurt, he could be your best blocker as a true freshman.
Yeah, because right now it's with Kevin Bauman hurt, and who knows when Eli Raritan gets back, and
I think Bauman will be back for spring, but he's just constantly injured.
Yeah. So if he suffers any setback or he gets injured again, then Eli Raritan's not ready to go early in the season. I mean, unless you're going to play Holden Stace every snap as second tight end, which fine, but there's going to be some opportunities on goal lines, especially where you're probably going to have 3 tight ends at the game also. So,
right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go here.
From Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker. He said, Peyton Bowen before the drama or Justin Scott. You can have one. Who are you taking and why? Thank you guys for a great show as always. This is so easy for me.
It is. Yeah. Easy.
It's nothing against Peyton Bowen. Peyton Bowen is a dynamic football player. We talked about him a lot last cycle before he decommitted.
Our opinion of him as a football player doesn't change because he's an immature kid who acted silly and made a poor decision and did it the wrong way. Doesn't mean he's still a 5-star player. He's still a great talent. He's still the second best safety in the class behind Caleb Downs, in my opinion.
Justin Scott brings dynamic elements up front, and he also gives you something you need a lot more of, and that's size. And he hits both those points. And and also, I mean, I'll say this too, Ryan. I think some people might, not care about this or as much as I do, but it's also an extremely bad look if you let a Chicago kid get out of Chicago and not go to Notre Dame. It's a terrible look.
A Catholic school kid in Chicago.
But you lost a Texas kid who stayed in the, stayed down there.
Girlfriend's going to Oklahoma, whatever.
Right. His best friend's going to Oklahoma, all that stuff. Sure. There's some stuff there. But if you let a Chicago kid who you need, is a priority for you, get out of Chicago, it's not a good look, man.
And even all that aside, that's all great points. Even that aside, I've guys, I've been consistent about this as long as y'all have known me. If I have to choose between an elite defensive lineman and an elite safety, I'm taking the elite defensive lineman every single time.
Yeah.
Every time. Right? Every time. That's just the way the game is played, in my opinion. It's just the way the game is played. Yep. And would I like both? Elite at both? Now, see, again, when Notre Dame gets to where they need to get to, they get both.
Exactly.
Right? But if I can only pick one, I'm especially an interior guy. So, I'm taking – and again, Peyton Bowen, he's still a great talent. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, he was a legit 5-star player. Like he was. Yes, 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Here's so Insured by Big, Ryan, is I believe one of the LSU fans on the site. So it's asked some good questions. I really think this is an interesting one, Ryan, because I actually have some answers for this one. So why don't you go ahead and read this one and
yeah. And the question from Insured by Big is, if Notre Dame didn't exist, what are one or two teams per conference? What one or two teams per conference could you see yourself being a fan of? Thanks, fellas. Have a blessed week.
Yeah,
you too,
this
sir.
is a good one. Like, I actually have thoughts on this. So because of different eras. So like ACC, North Carolina would be one. The uniforms are sweet. I've always liked the Tar Heels, because kind of grown up. Like Sean Davis and I were talking the other day. We were talking about like our favorite point guards growing up, because Sean and I are very similar in age. I think he's like maybe like a year or two older than me. We're very similar age. So we grew up in the same era. And we're talking about our favorite point guards, because the reason we were talking about it is because Adrian Autry just got hired as the head coach at Syracuse. And I was a big Adrian Autry fan. So Syracuse is my other ACC team because of basketball. I loved watching Syracuse as a kid playing basketball. Now, I ended up being a Michigan fan in basketball because of Glenn Rice and then the Fab Five and all that when I was still actually followed college basketball. But if I didn't go with them, it would have been Syracuse. I loved Syracuse growing up. And Adrian Autry was one of my, for whatever reason, was one of my favorite players. And the other one was King Rice. I don't know if you remember King Rice, played for North Carolina back in the day. And then Sean's was Chris Corciani, right? So like that's who are you pretending to be when you're out there? I'm Adrian Autry, because I was point guard. So or I'm King Rice or whatever. So those two teams in the ACC would have been mine. Who would your ACC teams be, Ryan?
Man, that's a tough one. ACC. I like North Carolina's uniforms. I like North Carolina's uniforms, so they might be one of them. Man, don't like Miami. Don't like Florida State. I probably would have went something obscure. Like maybe I just would have stayed in the Carolinas both and been like NC State Wolfpack fan because of Torrey Holt growing up. Like I love Torrey Holt as a player, as a Rams fan. So NC State, I guess. I don't know, man. That's not a good conference for me.
That's a good one. In basketball, you'd have had some stuff. You'd have had some teams to root for in basketball. So they had some good years. SEC, for me, that's easy also. It'd be Tennessee and Florida. I liked both of those teams growing up. I love Spurrier's offense. And I don't know what it is about Tennessee's uniforms and the checkered end zone. Those probably would have been the two that I've never liked Georgia very much for some reason. And I don't like any of the teams in the SEC West, to be honest with you. I never have. But Tennessee and Florida would be the two that would maybe I could see myself being a fan of, one of those two teams.
I feel like I would probably like Georgia a little bit. I think
if you grew up in my era, Ryan, I promise you'd be a Florida guy. No, I'm serious, because like you'd have really liked Spurrier. You'd have loved what they did offensively, and I think you'd have liked the brashness that he had. I think I think you'd have liked Florida.
Yeah, I think the Steve Spurrier Washington Redskin days might have tarnished him for me possibly. A little bit.
And then he made up for it by being phenomenal South Carolina.
That's very true. It's very true.
Well, the other thing too is I probably would have leaned towards Tennessee, because the one beef I had with Spurrier all those years is he was a bit of a chicken when it came to playing out of conference. Wouldn't play Miami, wouldn't travel up north. Where Tennessee, they'd play Notre Dame. I mean, they'd travel. They'd play teams. So if I had to pick between those two, I'd probably go Tennessee for me.
Yeah, I'd probably go Georgia, and then the second one's tough. Like
I'd have switched to South Carolina when Lou got hired there, though.
South Carolina's a good one. Because they got hired there, they were a fun team when I was a little younger too. Because I remember, when Lou took over there, and like they were really bad when he first got there, and then they got like Sidney Rice and like those dudes. You're like, okay, all right, so sure, let's go with South Carolina.
Yeah, let's go Big Ten, Ryan. Who would your team? This is actually harder because I have so much disdain for so many Big Ten teams. This would be a little bit harder.
So, I mean, growing up until the Sandusky era, it probably would have been Penn State, to be honest. They probably would have been one for me.
I could not stand Joe Paterno.
It's more of a regional thing. There's a lot of Penn State fans where I'm at. And then my grandfather was also a big Penn State fan. So I probably would have liked him until the whole Sandusky scandal happens. But
what's funny is a lot of my teams would have been because of basketball. When I was a kid, the Flying Illini, I liked I like the. I'm picking up a bit of an orange and blue pattern. I'm a Broncos
fan
out of Syracuse, Illinois. Maybe I found the secret sauce there for that one.
You didn't pick Syracuse in the ACC though, which are literally the Orange Men. So
I did, yeah. I did.
You picked Syracuse?
Yeah, I said because we picked two. I said North Carolina and Syracuse, and I started talking about how Adrian Autry and I love basketball and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
gotcha,
you were zoning out, still thinking of who your teams were going to be at that point.
Seriously, man, the ACC was the toughest conference for me so far. It was a tough one.
Big Ten, Illinois would be one. Man, the Big Ten's because I just dislike so many teams in the Big Ten. I just do.
Oh, it's an easy one for me. I don't know what I'm thinking. Rutgers would be another one. Yeah, regionally it would be.
But they're a new ACC team. That's just still kind of seems a bit lame to me. I'm trying to think of who else would I be.
I remember the Greg Schiano years were fun though, man. They were fun. The first Greg Schiano years, not these Greg Schiano years.
I'd probably go Purdue next. Probably be my next one in the Big Ten. Okay. Big 12. So I mean,
Kansas State would be one for me.
Kansas
I remember Darren Sproles when I was younger, and then I love Deuce Vaughn now.
Michael Bishop was one for me when he was younger. Yeah, that's a good one.
Kansas State,
a good one.
Oklahoma State, honestly, too. People hate him and think he's like a goof and stuff, and he is. But I like Mike Gundy. Yeah. I did. I mean, some of those wide receivers they had, like Justin Blackman. I was
the best college football player I've ever seen in my life played for Oklahoma State.
Oh, Barry Sanders.
Oh yeah, not even close.
And he followed Thurman Thomas, who's in the NFL Hall of Fame. It's just insane.
I know it is nuts. It's quite a backfield there. Big 12 for me. I mean, obviously, Ryan, you know where I'm going to go with this one to begin. Where's every other choice I've made been about? It's been about basketball.
Texas, you're a Longhorn guy.
No. It's been about basketball.
I thought you were talking about the orange again.
No. It's been about basketball. And so it's Kansas.
Yeah,
I mean, I grew up. I loved Roy. I still remember the year Danny Manning led him to a title. I was very young then, but I always Rafe LaFrance, Rex Chapman. What was his name? Adonis Jordan, right? Jock Vaughn couldn't shoot a lick, but I loved watching Jock Vaughn play.
He was tough, man. He was
Paul
tough.
Pierce was so smooth in college, man. Like just all the years, I've always liked Kansas.
He's smooth in the NBA too, Paul Pierce. Yeah.
And I had a little. So the second day as a married man, my wife and I were staying in a hotel watching Kansas beat Memphis in the NCAA championship. So,
nice.
So I Kansas probably would have been my team. I don't know who my other Big 12 team would have been, to be honest with you. It's just not a lot of Big 12 teams I feel any kind of way for, to be honest with you. Pac-12 is easy for me. It's UCLA and is definitely number one. And I don't know what it is, but I've always liked Arizona for some reason. Maybe it's the uniforms, but like I still remember the Desert Swarm defense under Dick Tomey. Remember back in the day. So those probably would have been.
Mine would be Utah would be number one for me, like easily. I wouldn't even think about it. Utah and Washington would probably be the other one. I don't know what it is about those uniforms, man. I'm not a purple guy, but like I like Washington's uniforms. I really do. I don't know why.
Yeah. They could the gold. The gold I think is a nice compliment to the purple. I do, especially when they go gold helmets. Like when I was a kid, they had the purple helmets, and I didn't like those very much. I like the gold helmets. I like it better when they go with the gold helmet. So Washington would be in that conference. UCLA is an easy one though for me though. That's an easy one for me. Stanford maybe when I was a kid just because of John Elway. I mean that maybe, but I don't even think then I would have really cared much about Stanford. It would probably Washington to be in the conversation. If I'm picking now, like if Notre Dame just, when Father Jenkins, if they start paying players, we're not going to do this anymore. Notre Dame just bowed out of playing football anymore. I'd look at Oregon State. I love what Jonathan Smith is doing there. I would watch that team play.
I had some pretty good memories of like Steven Jackson and stuff growing up too. And Steven Jackson was an animal, man. That guy was insane.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Those are fun. Those are fun. He said, insured by Big says, sorry for the PTSD with the Big Ten. I don't have PTSD. There's just not a lot of likable programs. Like, like I said, Michigan basketball, but I've always hated Michigan football. I just have hated Michigan football. And I don't particularly care much for most Michigan fans. Michigan State, maybe, but I don't know what it was.
Michigan State's not a bad one. Michigan State's not a bad one.
I didn't like George Perlis or Judd Heathcock growing up. They just were like these old grumpy guys, and I couldn't get around that. And then Tom Izzo, like just the brand of basketball he played. I mean, he's a great coach, but just that brand of basketball that when you're practicing basketball with shoulder pads and a helmet on, that's not basketball I enjoy, man. I'm sorry. It's like I hated the Pistons, and they had great players, but this is an ugly brand of basketball. The way that they played, in my opinion, I just didn't like it.
They used to have
there's no sexy teams. There's just nobody that gets me fired up in the Big Ten, So
Michigan State and Notre Dame had some nice battles in like the late 2000s.
Yeah. Oh, I love that as a rivalry.
Teams. Yeah.
I have a great deal of respect for Michigan State in that regard as an institution for how they fought for Notre Dame and all that.
Yeah.
I would absolutely want them on my schedule. I don't hate Michigan State. I don't know if I could be a fan of Michigan State. Like if it came down, I had to pick them or Michigan. It's a no-brainer. It's Michigan State.
I used to like Drew Stanton, even though he beat Notre Dame that one time. Man, he was a tough quarterback. Man,
somebody said Iowa. Iowa's a good one because as a kid, Iowa had a quality program. That was, I always liked the big hawk on their helmet, and and they had some good basketball teams back in the day under Dr. Tom Davis. Never knew what he was a doctor of, but remember they would call him Dr. Tom Davis.
Maybe he actually wasn't a doctor.
AC Earl. They had some good teams back then. Was it Roy Marble? They had some good teams back in basketball. Again, all my choices are off basketball because I never cared much about Notre Dame's basketball team. So I think that's where I always was open to rooting for another team. Florida State when I was a kid, I used to love wearing Florida State stuff because I was like, I don't know why. I don't even remember if I saw them play, but their baseball team was really good. And I followed their baseball team. And as a kid, I was really into baseball. So I had some Florida State years as a kid, but it's for baseball, not for football or basketball. They had one of my favorite teams, though, is the Bob Sura, Charlie Ward basketball team. I really liked watching that team play.
Iowa's another good one. I didn't even think about Iowa. Do you remember Albert Young, who played running back for Iowa back in the day?
Yes.
Like the early 2000s?
Wasn't that long ago,
He played Township Bowl in the same spot as me. I didn't play with him because he was like a couple years older than me, but I remember he was like the guy in my area, man. He went to Morristown High School here in New Jersey and it was like, oh my God, Albert Young. Like he was like that type of dude,
Yeah. Somebody said Indiana. Two reasons I couldn't root for Indiana. Number one is their football team has always stunk.
And they're boring.
And I was never a fan of Bobby Knight. Like Bobby Knight was a phenomenal coach. But like his antics on the side,
a little too abrasive for you.
No, it's not even that. It's just like some of the stuff he got that people hammer him for now. I'm like, just stop. Like, like that's how coaches were back then. It was a different era. I hate when people put like modern sensibilities back on, things that
throw in the chair on the
it's stuff like that bother me. It's the he would cuss people out and just because he knew no one could do anything about it. I never respected that very much. But phenomenal basketball coach. It's just that wasn't my style. I couldn't root for that. Like you said, the throw in the chair, just some of the antics were so over the top, like in press conferences and stuff like that. It's just like, oh man, I couldn't root for that. And but I could also still respect that he was a phenomenal basketball coach.
No one could doubt that. No one could doubt that.
And I don't like the way that they ran him out. I thought that was bullcrap, to be honest.
Remember when he went to Texas Tech after that?
And got him good again.
Yeah.
And it got him good again. Yeah. So tried to hand it over to his son. That just never works.
No,
not usually.
Works. Not usually.
Just never works. All right, got a last couple, Ryan, and we're gonna get out of here. Here's one for you. I'll read this one from John A1. One for Ryan. Did the Panthers do enough this week in free agency to support a rookie quarterback with adding Hayden Hurst and Miles Sanders, along with re-signing interior offensive lineman Bradley Bozeman?
Well, I think, John, I would say this, right? Offensive line-wise, I like the fact that the Panthers just said, we're going to re-sign our guys and we're going to keep that thing intact, right? Because they have a pretty good offensive line. Like, they played pretty well last year from the offensive line perspective. I like the addition of Miles Sanders. All due respect to Deontay Foreman last year, who was a good football player for them during the year. If Deontay Foreman could have the success he had behind that offensive line, I think Miles Sanders could have a lot more success. So I think he's going to do a good job there. The key for the Panthers is whoever the quarterback is, you need to start getting some weapons on the outside. That's like my only quarrel with it is that Hayden Hurst is a solid, secondary tight end, right? Like it's fine, but you need to get a legitimate tight end in that room, and you need to get some guys outside because without DJ Moore, you're betting on guys like Terrace Marshall to be the guy. And could he be a nice secondary option? It's possible, but I don't think he's a number one receiver. Like that's kind of where we are with that conversation. So
yeah, that's the point where I think you nailed it right there, Ryan. Before you move on, I think you nailed that. They in the NFL, if you're going to have a young quarterback, you need a guy they can really depend on.
Yeah.
And Terrace Marshall's a nice number 3 receiver, maybe number 2 in time. But they don't have anybody coming back from their roster that had 500 yards receiving last year.
It's like Terrace Marshall, Shi Smith.
Disappointment. Yeah. And I thought he was going to be better. They're okay at tight end, but it's like they're just not that. Like you said,
the tight ends are not very productive.
They don't have a lot of talent. And Hayden Hurst, basically, you traded Hayden Hurst for DJ Moore. Look at it that way, and that's not a positive for them. In my opinion. Meaning, who's off the roster and who's on the roster? You lost DJ Moore, and you replaced him with Hayden Hurst. That's not to me. That's not necessarily a net gain.
You need to hit on a couple pieces as far as around whoever the quarterback is at one somehow. You need to find a couple guys, whether that's in the – do they even have a second-round pick now? I don't even know if they do. Like, you need to find a couple secondary pass options at least. I mean, if you're not going to have a true number one receiver, which you're most likely not unless you find a big, like, underrated guy, I don't know, you still need to find a couple decent receivers to put around C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, whoever they end up picking. Like, right now, you're depending on Shi Smith. You're depending on Laviska Shenault to be the secondary weapons next to Terrace Marshall.
They still have number 39, Ryan.
Okay.
Because the second-round pick that they gave up this year was the one they got from San Francisco.
Gotcha.
So
best wide receiver or tight end available at 39 has to be.
Yeah. So they have the number one pick, number 39, and then they pick again at 93. So there's still at least a couple chances, and they have 2 picks in round 4. So even though they gave up a lot, there's still some chances for them to get some guys. You know, here's the thing, you better hit it. You better hit it well. And I think there's some receivers that they could draft at 39 that could be good football players. I think if they're guys step in day one, good football players. You know what I mean?
I think that for me, the dream scenario is quarterback, and then Joshua Downs is there at number 39. I think that would be a fantastic. I mean, because he plays a little bit like DJ Moore. I think that would be a very suitable release.
Thick, but yeah.
Well, not as thick, but he excels in the air more than you would think he would. Really good body control, and then he's got that explosiveness, right? So, I think that he would be a home run pick at 39 if he was there. I really like that spot.
Yeah, 39 is not a bad place to pick if you need a skill player.
No,
or an offensive lineman.
Especially in this draft.
Exactly. And there'll still be some guys in the 90s that you could, that you'll be able to find and some gems there at certain spots if you need to. All right, we got a couple super chats around, and then we're gonna wrap things up here real quick. After those, we have one from Nathan Milton.
Milton's question is, what player? Sorry, Nathan. I'm calling you Milton because
thank
Milton
you for the super chat, Nathan.
Yeah, appreciate it. What players would you move to different positions on the roster?
Well, one. I mean, one already, and that's Clarence Lewis from corner to safety. I'd flat out make that move right now.
I don't know if there's another one that like hits me in the face.
If you're going to talk like Michael Carmody from center to guard, I mean, that's a position move. I mean, that's one. I would make that move. I would give him a chance to compete at guard. There's not a ton. I mean, if Tyson Ford's an end, I'd consider moving him to a 3 technique.
Yeah.
I'd move Aiden Goldbyre from Viper to big end. Like, that I count that as a position switch.
And
I'd move Junior John Locke back to Mike.
Yeah.
That's one I would do.
And they already moved. They already moved Riley Mills back to 3 tech, so like that's one I would have made. Yeah.
Those are ones. That's where I would look if it was up to me. And then we have a Le'em Rock with a super chat here as well.
And their question is: can 2023 Notre Dame level stat line, i.e., low red zone D versus high stats elsewhere?
I'm not quite sure what the question is asking. I mean, to me, I'm looking at it maybe from the standpoint of improving that area. I get perhaps. I mean,
is he saying it's leveling out? So maybe a couple high stats go down, but you get more of like a consistency across the board?
I think what you need to do is you need to stay good at where you're good.
Yeah,
like to me, because if you're not as good here, but you're better here, then you're pretty much in the same spot.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd rather be really good at something and then maybe not good at something else than just be kind of mediocre at both. Yeah. So I think the key, if that's where we're going with the question, to me, I would say I would look at it and say, hey, I want to kind of see. I would kind of pull it out that way, right?
I definitely don't want to level off on strengths. I definitely don't want to level off. That's not how you win, in my opinion, right? Like you maintain and the good and you increase the bad, right? Or increase the less than average type of stuff,
Right. So those are definitely areas where I would look at it for sure. So people keep asking about a new commitment. It's not a commitment from it's a walk on. So it's Eric Lindstrom. So I don't have an opinion of him right this second.
Is it 2024 or
2023 kid? 23 kid. So yeah, but I don't have an opinion. So Ryan, if you want to kind of, if there's any other questions here, we have another question here. So I'm going to pop in some film, but this is not a scholarship kid. This is a walk on, which is fine. Hey, look, Ryan, Notre Dame's up in their walk on game in a big way. I'm happy about that. But I just not going to have immediate film of every walk on kid that commits. So Ryan, if you want to read and address this question, and I'll quickly pop in some film and share some thoughts on what I see from this kid as we're talking.
Okay. Yep. Let me take a look and see what we have.
I started. I didn't bring it up. Here we go.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So from Team
That's my fault.
No, you're fine. Brian Ryan, have not been to a home game in the Bend since 2016. Missed the Clemson game last year, deciding between USC and Ohio State. Which game and why? And where should I sit tailgates at? That's a good question.
Can I ask T-Mill to answer a question first, and then I'll let you answer it, Ryan?
Yep.
My first question is have you ever been to a USC Notre Dame game before? So while Ryan's answering his, if you could let me know that, T-Mill, I'm very curious about that because that's going to impact my answer a little bit.
Well, my answer was actually going to be USC because that's just more of a – it's not as much a rivalry as it once was because you don't play them as consistent as you once did, right? But I think that you're in a situation now where Notre Dame should be good, USC should be a good team, and that history matters, in my opinion, right? And I think that we have trouble sometimes from a home game perspective of getting fans like let's go excited about coming to a game. I don't think you have to do that. I mean, you probably don't have to do that at either one of those games, but like USC especially, like most Notre Dame fans hate USC. Like that's just kind of where it is, right? So just for the environment, I would probably lean to USC, but I mean, if you end up going to Ohio State, that's not a bad game to be at, obviously.
Yeah. For me, he says he has not been to a Notre Dame. So if you've never been to a Notre Dame USC game, then it's the USC game. I mean, because this year's USC game is going to be unlike a lot of past years. This is what I liked about last year. Yeah, it didn't work out well for Notre Dame, but I'd much rather play USC when they're good. For me, I have. But that's the rivalry game, right? That is Notre Dame's biggest rival is USC. And if you have a chance to go to one of those games, and definitely go. And it sounds like since you haven't been since 2016, it's not like you're going to a bunch of games. You could say Ohio State because they don't play Ohio State a whole lot, right? And so but to me, it's like, part of the tradition of Notre Dame is, hey, I've been to a Navy game. I've been to Notre Dame Navy. I've been to Notre Dame Michigan. I've been to Notre Dame USC. Like those are the rivalry games. I've been to Notre Dame Michigan State. I've been to Notre Dame Purdue. Notre Dame Ohio State's pretty cool, but it's just kind of like, but it doesn't have that same traditional feel. So for me, I would say that. And then financially speaking, it's probably going to be a lot cheaper for you to buy a ticket to the USC game. I mean, it's just being honest.
Very true.
And there's going to be a lot of scarlet and gray in the stadium that day because a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to do what they always do, and they're going to sell. I mean, we can say, hey, I hope that they don't, but they will. They will, because Ohio State fans are going to pay big bucks to get to that game. There's no doubt. And Notre Dame fans are going to sell their tickets. And a lot of Ohio State fans are going to buy them online because there's not a way to, limit that the way that Notre Dame does it. So, yeah, I would say the USC game. Just if you've never been to a Notre Dame USC game, that'd be my pick. So, yeah. And depending on which part of Virginia you live in, I would encourage you to maybe consider driving up. My parents drive up from Virginia when they come up for games. It's not that bad of a drive, especially if you're in Northern Virginia and you can cut a couple hours off of it. It's not a bad drive. But, yeah, I would say USC would be the one for me. That would be the one for me. So watch a little bit of Lindstrom, Eric, or Ryan. Good. He's a teammate of Benedict Uma.
Oh, nice.
So Ume, yeah. He's from Avon Old Farms. So that's the one thing I noticed when I was watching the film. He's a good walk-on. He's tall. He's a little 6'3"-ish, maybe 6'2.5", 6'3". Not the 6'4" he's listed as, I don't think.
Position?
Yeah, defensive end, edge, like Viper type of kid. High motor kid, decent get off. Okay frame. He's listed at 200 pounds. He's probably 205 pounds. Quality athlete. Great motor. Uses his hands okay. He's a quality walk-on. He's a quality walk-on. Yeah, he's a quality walk-on. I like that. It's a good walk-on. He's not he's not Luke Towlett. He's not Jordan Faison. He's not Henry Garrity, in my opinion. But he's a good walk-on. So, and gives you some good depth there. Kid that's going to play his butt off down on the scout team and maybe be a special teams guy down the road. So, yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good. Good pick. Good pick. Yeah, and if you're Roanoke, it should take you a little less than 12 hours from Roanoke, depending on where. Yeah, I mean, so, but I've made that drive. It's a hike, but yeah. USC game would be the one that I would say to go to. Plus, it'll be a little bit cooler. And I just I don't know. There's just something about there being a little bit of a nip in the air when Notre Dame plays football that just makes me feel like I'm at a Notre Dame game. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is, but it's just kind of how I feel. You know what I mean? So I like that one. So anyway, so Ryan, that's going to do it for today's show. That's a good question. So obviously we were able to break down a little bit Eric Lidstrom, Ryan. You'll be able to watch them and talk about them on the message board. But that's why you need to talk about. That's why you need to be on the message board. So for a second there, when they were talking about they're talking about Eric Lindstrom committed, I was like, are they getting the name wrong? Like, was it really the kid from? Yes,
Lindstrom?
That's what I was thinking. Like, maybe they got the name wrong, and I'm like, hold on a second, I didn't think that kid was about to commit. So I thought it was Kellen Lindstrom that they were talking about, and I was like, wow, that's a surprise. You know, Al Washington getting a nice pick. That's an interesting kid. That kid, by the way, he's very toolsy, but just doesn't make a ton of plays. You know, it's like he's got some ability, man. 6'6", 240, really good burst. He's got some upside. But
he's got some Joey Bosa-esque vibes to him. Yeah, I agree.
Style of play wise for sure. Yes. So I was like, well, that's a good pickup, but it's Eric Lindstrom. So that's why I was a little bit thrown off by that one. So I was like, okay, there we go. All right, Ryan. Well, that's going to do it, everybody, for today's show. Hey, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. If you have not signed up for this pod, for our message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, you are missing out. I'm telling you right now, you are. Definitely do that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You can sign up for $4.99 for a monthly membership or $49.99 for an annual membership. Or if you just want to support us above and beyond that, we also have the booster clubs, which come with cool perks like a free IB mug club. Or an IB Gold Club T-shirt if you sign up for the Gold Club. If you're someone who's not really a message board person, but you want to support us financially, you don't have to be on the message board. You can just sign up for a membership, and then that'll help you out. And then I don't say what they are because I don't want to promise it till I can deliver it, but there's some other perks that we're going to have here hopefully this summer that'll come with an annual membership as well. So definitely want to take advantage of that. So anyway, for Ryan, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your day, folks. Enjoy the NCAA tournament. And of course, we'll be back with you again here soon. We will not have a rapid fire today at 5:00 because Sean Stiers is doing the women's basketball game, but he'll be back at it on Monday. And Ryan, you're going to have a special draft episode tomorrow. Do you have a time when that's going to be? It's going to go live.
8 o'clock, I believe.
8 o'clock p.m.
Yes.
So tomorrow night, 8 o'clock p.m. on CFB Nation, Ryan is going to have a live NFL draft show. Ryan, what are you guys going to be? Are you going to be doing your mock? Is that what you're going to be doing?
We're going to be doing an updated mock now that the Carolina Panthers have the number 1 overall pick. I haven't done a mock draft since that trade happened. So
you did a mock Thursday night, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to hold off on this and put it up Saturday. And then by Friday afternoon, that mock was null and void because of that big trade with the Panthers. So he's going to get back to – is it just going to be you, or are you going to have a guest with you on Saturday night?
Might have a special guest, but still waiting on confirmation.
Very cool. Very cool. I look forward to definitely checking that out. So that's going to be live on the CFB Nation YouTube channel, 8 o'clock. So definitely make sure you check that out. And that's why you should be subscribed to that channel. So anyway, for Ryan, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your day, folks. And thank you for being with us on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.